What if you've spent your entire life preparing for something that will never arrive? Imagine the weight of every morning, every plan, every sacrifice, all staged as though the real event is waiting just beyond the horizon, only for that horizon to never come. Life then becomes a rehearsal hall with no premiere, a script you memorize though no audience will ever hear. You polish lines, practice gestures, and refine choices, yet the curtain refuses to rise. Some theories suggest this is not tragic but inevitable. Existence itself is rehearsal, not performance. The show was never scheduled. The practice is all there is. Tonight, as you sink deeper into thought, you will trace experiments, philosophies, and illusions that whisper the same truth. You are not living the grand play you imagined. You are endlessly rehearsing for nothing at all. Life, as you live it, often feels staged, as though each choice, each word, each motion of your body is part of some greater script. Yet, what happens if there is no audience? Imagine standing on a stage, lights dim, rehearsing your lines with precision. But beyond the curtain there is only silence. Not even a single listener breathes in the shadows. The theories you will wander through suggest that this is not a metaphor, it is reality. You speak, but no ear waits. You act, but no eye beholds. Existence becomes a script, endlessly performed in the vacuum of absence. Philosophers from Sartre to Camus brushed against this possibility. Sartre called it nausea, the recognition that the world is not waiting for your performance, but merely indifferent to it. Camus pressed deeper. Perhaps your lines are not meant to be heard at all, but only repeated in defiance of silence. Neuroscience, in its own clinical way, reaches the same abyss. Experiments on memory and attention reveal that much of what you do is not even recorded by your own mind. Your audience is not absent only in the world. It is absent within you. Whole hours, entire rehearsals of your life, vanish without a trace. Think about the countless mornings you have risen, brushed your teeth, walked through familiar doors. Each act, a line spoken to no one. No applause follows, no critic reviews your effort. You convince yourself that someone someday will notice, but the data suggests otherwise. Even those closest to you misremember, misinterpret, or forget most of what you perform. The audience you imagine is a ghost, and you are an actor speaking to shadows. This is not only philosophy, it is performance theory inverted. In theatre, the presence of the audience transforms rehearsal into performance. But if no audience exists, if the cosmos itself does not bear witness, then life never leaves the rehearsal hall. Everything remains unfinished, provisional, endlessly provisional. Even your triumphs become lines rehearsed and discarded, never crystallizing into permanence. The paradox here is suffocating and liberating at once. If no audience exists, then failure does not matter. You cannot miss your mark if no one is watching. Yet equally, you cannot succeed. The applause, the recognition, the meaning you long for, it never comes. All that remains is the script itself, and the strange persistence of your voice echoing in emptiness. Some neuroscientists argue that consciousness itself is this empty audience. Your brain stages the play for itself, rehearsing fragments of perception, stitching them into coherence. But there is no spectator behind the curtain, no homunculus listens. The stage is full, the actors busy, the lights warm, but the house is empty, and so the play repeats. Imagine, then, the strange freedom this offers. If no one is watching, perhaps you are released from expectation. Perhaps the lines you rehearse can be altered, forgotten, improvised. Perhaps the performance is not meant to arrive anywhere, but is in itself the only reality you will ever know. The audience is silence, and silence is faithful. But here the recursive trap appears. Even as you think this, even as you imagine freedom in absence, you are still rehearsing the thought. You still believe the idea might be witnessed, if not by others, then by yourself. And yet, you too are fleeting, dissolving, an unreliable spectator who forgets his own lines. Your mind, the one place you hoped would hold the memory of performance, is itself just another empty seat. So the curtain falls, though it was never lifted. The lines echo, though no one listens. The rehearsal continues, without end, for nothing at all. And you, the actor, must ask yourself, if the script was never written to be heard, what is the meaning of speaking? Perhaps the meaning is nothing. Perhaps nothing is all there is. Every gesture you make feels like preparation. The way you arrange your clothes in the morning, the way you rehearse conversations in your head before they unfold, the way you save money, collect objects or polish skills. It all seems staged for a moment yet to come. But what if that moment never arrives? What if everything you are practicing is only rehearsal, endlessly repeated for a show that will never open? This is the unsettling suggestion behind the idea of life as a dress rehearsal of emptiness. A rehearsal, by definition, is unfinished. It carries the weight of expectation, but never the permanence of conclusion. Actors in rehearsal make mistakes freely because they assume a final version will redeem them. You too forgive yourself by believing the future will correct the present. But if the performance never comes, then rehearsal is all there is. Every stumble, every misstep, every forgotten line is not preparation, but the reality itself. The curtain never rises, the audience never arrives, and all your practice dissolves into the void. Psychology provides strange evidence for this. Studies of delayed gratification, like the famous marshmallow experiment, show how much of human existence is built on postponement, on denying the present, in the hope of a greater future. Children wait for the marshmallow, workers save for retirement, lovers hold back words until the right time. But what if there is no right time? What if waiting is the entirety of existence? Then life becomes not an investment, but a perpetual rehearsal for nothing, a denial of now in favor of a performance that never begins. Philosophy has its own vocabulary for this emptiness. Heidegger wrote of being toward death, the idea that existence is shaped not by living but by anticipating its end. Yet if death is the only certainty, then every moment rehearses a finale that erases itself. Emptiness is the destination, and every act prepares you to meet it without applause. In Zen Buddhism, this realization takes a different form, the koan-like truth that there is no performance because there is nothing to perform for. Emptiness itself is the stage, and the rehearsal is the play. Think about how often you tell yourself, once I graduate, once I succeed, once I find love, once I am recognized, then I will truly begin. Each thought pushes life into rehearsal, turning the present into scaffolding for a future that may never come. The paradox is that when the future arrives, it dissolves instantly into another rehearsal. You are always practicing for something else, always preparing for tomorrow, and tomorrow never becomes today. Consider the rituals of rehearsal in theater. Costumes are fitted, but not fully worn. Props are used, but not polished. Lines are spoken, but not performed with full force. Everything exists in a liminal state, not finished, not real. Now realize that this is your life. You wear costumes not as yourself but as roles. The professional, the friend, the child, the parent. Yet beneath them there is no final character. The rehearsals continue, costumes changing, lines forgotten, but no premiere ever arrives. Neuroscience adds to this haunting vision. Research on memory consolidation shows that most experiences never become stable memories. Your brain rehearses them briefly during sleep, then discards them. You live days, whole rehearsals of existence, only for them to be erased by the next cycle of forgetting. If life is rehearsal, your own brain ensures that most rehearsals are never even remembered. You prepare, but the preparation prepares nothing. And so the image becomes clear. An actor forever trapped backstage, endlessly dressing, endlessly repeating, endlessly imagining an audience that never gathers. You live rehearsing for a future self you will never meet, performing for an emptiness that does not care. The irony is crushing, yet in that irony lies a strange form of release. If life is rehearsal, and rehearsal is all there is, then perhaps you can stop waiting. Perhaps you can live rehearsal, as if it were the play itself. But the recursion does not end. Even this thought, live rehearsal as reality, becomes another rehearsal, another philosophy you prepare, but never fully perform. The trap tightens, rehearsal cannot escape itself, and you are left wondering whether emptiness itself is applauding, silently, invisibly, in a theater that has never existed. Think of every word you've spoken in your life. The casual greetings, the whispered promises, the angry outbursts, the explanations rehearsed in your head, and then delivered with trembling certainty. Now realize this, almost all of them are forgotten, not just by others but by you. They linger only as faint vibrations, echoes that never truly land anywhere. If life is a rehearsal, then your words are lines rehearsed into a void, discarded the moment they leave your lips. What remains is not memory but the faintest aftertaste of sound swallowed by silence. Theatrical rehearsal often involves repeating the same lines again and again, until the actor forgets which repetition is real and which was only practice. So too with life. You say I love you, I'm sorry, I'll try again tomorrow, so many times that the words lose their sharpness. They become echoes, half alive, half hollow, until you no longer know whether they ever carried meaning. Forgotten lines shape you more than remembered ones, for in their forgetting, they erase the illusion that rehearsal will end. Psychology confirms this quiet erasure. Experiments on memory retention, from Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve to modern neuroscience, show that within hours of learning, most detail is already gone. 90% of your daily rehearsal is lost to time, leaving only scraps. Imagine an actor who rehearses for months, only to find the lines gone by opening night. That is your existence. Except in your case, there is no opening night. The forgotten lines are the performance. Consider the words you once believed would define you, the vows you spoke, the arguments you fought, the stories you told of who you are. How many of them can you recall with clarity? How many are reduced to vague impressions, like a shadow at dusk? And yet you live as though these lines matter, as though someone somewhere will remember them. The paradox is cruel. Your voice is both the marker of your existence and the proof of its vanishing. Each line rehearsed becomes another line forgotten. Philosophers have circled this truth for centuries. Nietzsche wrote that words themselves are worn coins, their meanings eroded by endless repetition. The coin still passes from hand to hand, but its inscription fades. You speak lines whose meanings have already slipped away, echoes rehearsed into nothingness. Wittgenstein went further, suggesting that meaning lies only in use. Yet if use itself is forgotten, what remains? A rehearsal hall filled with murmurs no one recalls. Even the sciences of language betray you here. Studies of linguistic relativity suggest that language shapes thought, that the lines you rehearse are the scaffolding of your reality. But when those lines vanish, what scaffolding is left? If your reality depends on words and your words are forgotten, then perhaps reality itself is an echo, empty, unstable, rehearsed without permanence. Imagine standing in a great empty theater. You whisper a line, and it bounces off the walls, repeating itself softer each time. I was here. I was here. The echo dies, and silence swallows it. Was the whisper real, or was the echo the only reality? Your life is built on such whispers, lines spoken and forgotten, yet rehearsed as though they mattered. Here lies the recursive trap. Even in knowing this, you cannot stop speaking. You continue to rehearse, to speak your lines, to fill the air with echoes that fade into nothing. You know they will be forgotten, but you cannot resist. Perhaps you hope the echo will reach further this time. Perhaps you imagine that someone, somewhere, will catch it. But silence always wins. And yet, within that silence, there is an odd form of beauty. The fact that line is forgotten does not mean it was never spoken. It vibrated once. It existed. Its echo brushed the walls of time, however briefly. Life as rehearsal may be empty, but emptiness itself hums with the memory of forgotten lines. You are not performing for eternity. You are performing for the echo, and the echo is all that remains. So you rehearse again tomorrow. You will speak, you will forget, and you will live inside the paradox, lines rehearsed, lines erased, echoes that dissolve, and when you finally leave the stage, the theater will be as silent as it was before you entered. Only the faintest vibrations will linger, forgotten lines, still rehearsing themselves in emptiness. A stage gives meaning to performance. Its edges define where the actor begins and where the world ends. The lights tell you when it matters. The curtains announce that something is happening. The architecture itself declares, this is the space of significance. But what if you are performing without a stage? What if your entire life is a play, acted in an unmarked field, with no lights, no curtains, no borders to separate the performance from the void? The theories you are now wandering into suggest that this is precisely your condition. Every day you step into routines, greetings, labor, rituals that feel rehearsed, yet there is no stage to frame them. Without framing, performance dissolves into mere motion. You smile at a stranger, but it is not framed as kindness. It becomes only a fleeting curl of the lips. You labor for years, but without the stage of recognition, it is indistinguishable from dust. Without the stage, all roles collapse into the chaos of ordinary time. Theater theorist Richard Sechner once wrote that performance is twice behaved behavior, meaning it is distinguished from ordinary life by the fact that it is framed, rehearsed, meant for presentation. But neuroscience complicates this. Your brain does not know the difference between practice and performance. The circuits that fire when you imagine an act are nearly identical to those that fire when you perform it. To your neurons there is no stage, only repetition. You are rehearsing always, and performing never. Consider history's endless rituals. Coronations, funerals, processions. Each was designed to frame existence, to turn motion into meaning. Remove the stage, and even kings become men shuffling down a hallway. The play dissolves back into emptiness. Modern life mirrors this dissolution. You document yourself with photos, posts, and records, hoping to frame existence into a stage, but the frames are endlessly scrolling, endlessly buried. The more you attempt to create a stage, the more you reveal there is none. Philosophy, too, wrestles with this emptiness. Kierkegaard asked what it means to live before God. The stage, he thought, was divine judgment, the eternal audience that made existence matter. But Nietzsche killed that stage, declaring God dead, leaving you rehearsing in a void. Without God, without eternal witnesses, without metaphysical curtains, you act, but your acting is indistinguishable from silence. The performance is not seen, not staged, not recorded. You are an actor wandering through an unlit field, carrying lines that dissolve into the grass. Psychology adds another layer of paradox. Experiments on social presence show that people alter their behavior when they believe they are observed, even when no observer exists. A one-way mirror, an imagined camera, even a drawing of an eye on the wall changes the way humans act. You live as if you are on stage, even when no stage exists. You carry yourself as if the lights are on, as if someone is watching, though no audience has gathered. The performance becomes internalized. You become your own phantom stage. But the recursion deepens. If you are your own stage, then who is the audience? If you are both performer and stage, then the meaning collapses into tautology. You act for yourself, but you yourself forget, misremember, distort. The performance vanishes, even in the only witness that remains. Performing without a stage is performing for no one, including yourself. This is where the existential paradox tightens its grip. You cannot stop performing, even knowing the stage is absent. You still act, still gesture, still rehearse. You play roles, the worker, the lover, the parent, roles that mean nothing without framing. Yet you cannot not play them. You cannot live outside the performance, even when the performance has no stage. And so you live in the theatre of nothing. Your words echo into unframed air. Your motions blur into ordinary time. Your presence dissolves into a void that does not distinguish rehearsal from premiere. Performing without a stage means never knowing when it mattered, if it mattered, or if it was only dust. Perhaps that is the hidden truth of existence, that the stage was never built, that the curtains were never hung, that the spotlight never shone. You were never meant to perform, you were only ever meant to rehearse. And in this endless rehearsal, the paradox repeats. You are both actor and silence, performance and emptiness, rehearsing lines that were never written for a stage that never stood. Rehearsal carries with it an assumption that one day it will end, that the repetition will finally give way to performance. You practice your lines, not because you enjoy the endless cycle, but because you believe there will come a moment when the curtain rises. But what if the practice never ends? What if life itself is nothing but repetition, circling endlessly with no arrival, no premiere, no final night? Consider the rhythm of your days. You wake, you eat, you work, you sleep, you repeat. At first you tell yourself this is practice, preparing for a better tomorrow, a stronger self, a brighter future. Yet the future never arrives. It only becomes another day of practice, like Sisyphus pushing his stone up the mountain. Your routines climb endlessly toward a peak that recedes forever. Practice is not leading anywhere. It is the destination. Psychology's experiments on habit loop theory show how deeply this truth runs. The basal ganglia of the brain ingrains behaviors through repetition, forming habits that can last a lifetime. But these habits do not aim at a performance. They are their own fulfillment. When you brush your teeth, you are not rehearsing for a grand dental exhibition. You are simply looping. When you speak polite phrases, when you stand in line, when you perform rituals of daily life, you are practicing, yes, but practicing without end. The rehearsal never transitions into the show. Philosophers of time echo this unsettling possibility. Nietzsche's thought experiment of eternal recurrence asked, what if every moment you live will repeat forever, endlessly exactly as it is? Would you embrace this repetition, or despair in it? Life, in this view, is not rehearsal for something else, but rehearsal looping back on itself forever. There is no premiere, no finale, only the endless wheel turning. Even the sciences of biology suggest you are trapped in practice without end. Cellular processes rehearse themselves constantly. Replication, transcription, Translation: your body's very existence is an unending rehearsal of cycles. Cells die, new ones form, only to die again. There is no grand unveiling of a perfected self, no completed product. Your body is practice embodied, endlessly repeating itself until it ceases. Think of how often you convince yourself, once I master this, I'll be ready. You prepare for careers, for love, for success, for wisdom. Yet when you arrive, you realize you are still practicing, learning, stumbling, refining. The performance you imagined always lies ahead, and ahead never arrives. Life is structured as a hallway of mirrors. Each reflection prepares for another, and the exit remains out of sight. In theater, rehearsal rooms are marked by incompletion. Costumes are half-worn, props are placeholders, lines are uncertain. The actor never inhabits the role fully until the premiere. Yet, if the premiere never comes, then incompletion is all there is. You live as an unfinished script, practicing lines that will never stabilize, embodying characters that never solidify. Your rehearsal is the only performance, and it is never done. This truth gnaws at the psyche. To accept that practice never ends is to confront futility. But paradoxically, it is also to discover freedom. If practice is all there is, then mistakes are not failures but part of the eternal loop. There is no opening night to ruin, no final judgment to fear. You cannot fail a performance that will never arrive. You can only rehearse, and rehearsal is endless. Yet the recursion deepens. Even if you embrace the loop, even if you decide to love the practice itself, you are still rehearsing. You are still preparing for a day when you will finally accept fully, finally arrive at peace. But that day too becomes another rehearsal. Acceptance itself is practiced endlessly, never finalized. You are caught in infinite preparation. Think of memory here. Your brain rehearses events during sleep through neural replay, but even these rehearsals are fragile, prone to distortion, forgetting or fabrication. Your life is practiced by your own mind each night, yet it never becomes permanent. The mind practices, the body practices, the self practices, but no final script exists. So you continue. You rise, repeat, prepare again. The practice never ends, and perhaps that is the truth you were not meant to escape. That existence is not about arrival but about rehearsal, not about performance, but about endless practice. You are not meant to finish the lines, you are meant to repeat them forever. And in the quiet moments, when you sense the futility, you may also sense a strange comfort. For if life is practice that never ends, then perhaps practice itself is all the meaning there is. Not the premiere, not the applause, not the finale, but the repetition, the endless rehearsal, the eternal preparation for nothing at all. Every role you play feels like it carries weight. The role of student, worker, parent, friend, enemy, believer, skeptic. Each seems to shape your existence, to carve meaning into the script of your life. But roles, however carefully rehearsed, are fragile. They are not etched in stone. They are written in dust. A single gust, a shift in perspective, the passage of a little time, and the roles vanish as though they were never there at all. Anthropology teaches us that roles are constructed by culture, assigned like costumes. You are born into certain expectations, gender, class, family, faith, and you rehearse them as if they were essential. Yet history proves otherwise. Roles shift dramatically across eras. A role honored in one century becomes meaningless in another. What was once sacred can become absurd. Dust is the truest scriptwriter, erasing roles faster than they can be performed. Psychology, too, reveals how easily roles dissolve. In experiments like Philip Zimbardo's infamous Stanford prison experiment, participants slipped into the roles of guard or prisoner within hours. But the roles were not permanent. They crumbled once the rehearsal ended. A guard became again a student. A prisoner became again a young man. The dust settled. The roles gone. Your identity, too, is this fragile, etched into dust, rehearsed until forgotten, erased by the simplest shift of circumstance. Think of how often you have reinvented yourself. As a child, you rehearsed one set of roles, playing at being adult. As an adult, you rehearsed others, trying to live up to an ideal. Yet each time you thought you had settled, the dust blew in, scattering your certainty. You thought you were this, only to discover you were that, and then, you were neither. Roles rehearse themselves through you, but none endure. Philosophy calls this contingency. Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, never fixed, never stable, always rehearsing roles they themselves choose and then discard. But the paradox is clear. Even the roles you choose are temporary, collapsing like chalk marks on a board that is wiped clean. Life rehearses roles that vanish into dust, and dust rehearses itself as permanence until you notice it was never permanent at all. Neuroscience provides its own version of dust. The self is not a stable role, but a shifting construction of neural networks. Your brain rehearses a narrative of continuity, but it is fragile. Under anesthesia, memory loss, or trauma, the role you thought was you dissolves instantly. One moment you are an actor in a grand story, the next you are a blank slate. The rehearsal was real, but the role was written in dust. Even society's great roles, kings, prophets, generals, leaders, are dust-bound. Look at the ruins of empires, the forgotten names in history. Their roles, once rehearsed with grandeur, are now little more than fading inscriptions on crumbling stones. You rehearse your own smaller roles with equal intensity, but the dust waits patiently. It knows that every performance, no matter how important it seems, is temporary. The paradox deepens when you realize that roles written in dust still shape your life profoundly. Though fragile, they feel real while you play them. You suffer for them, rejoice in them, fight wars, build nations, raise children, all in the service of dust-born identities. And yet, when the rehearsal ends, the role erases itself, leaving behind silence. Imagine writing a message in sand at the edge of the sea. You bend carefully, inscribing your role: friend, lover, believer, dreamer. The letters look solid for a moment, as though they will last. Then the tide comes in, sweeping them away. Did the message matter? For a while, yes. You rehearsed it, you saw it, but permanence was never promised. Life too is this rehearsal, roles drawn in dust, waiting for the inevitable erasure. And yet, within this erasure, there may be a strange form of liberation. If roles are dust, then perhaps you are free to rewrite them endlessly. You are not condemned to a single performance. You are free to rehearse new roles every day. The danger is believing any of them will last. The freedom is knowing you can keep rehearsing, keep writing in dust, even when the tide is certain. But the recursion never ends. Even as you embrace this truth, you rehearse another role, the role of one who understands, the role of one who accepts. And that role too is written in dust, ready to vanish with the next shift of wind. You cannot escape rehearsal, and you cannot escape dust. You can only continue, speaking lines that dissolve as soon as they are uttered, playing roles that erase themselves before the curtain even rises. So you remain on this endless stage of dust, rehearsing roles that never last, roles that never stabilize, roles that whisper to you that permanence was always an illusion. You are not solid stone, you are dust rehearsing itself into shapes, only to scatter again. And perhaps that scattering is the only performance that ever truly exists. In every performance, costumes announce who you are before you speak a single line. They tell the audience you are a king, a servant, a soldier, a ghost. But what if the costumes remain while the characters vanish? What if life, as you live it, is a closet full of masks and garments with no one real behind them? Then existence itself becomes a masquerade without essence. Costumes worn endlessly, characters rehearsed but never truly alive. From birth, you are dressed in costumes, gendered clothes, cultural symbols, uniforms of identity, a baby in blue, a baby in pink. Later, the student's badge, the worker's tie, the wedding ring, the mourning black. Each outfit rehearses a role, convincing others, and perhaps convincing you that a character inhabits it. But peel away the layers, and you find only another costume beneath. Where is the character? Where is the self? Perhaps nowhere. Psychology reveals how easily you mistake the costume for the person. In Irving Goffman's theory of social dramaturgy, life itself is theater. You wear masks depending on the stage. One face at work, another at home, another in solitude. Yet these masks do not cover a stable character. They are the character. Remove the mask, and there is nothing solid beneath it. Only another mask, another rehearsal. Experiments on conformity reinforce this. Participants given a white coat performed tasks with greater confidence when told it was a doctor's coat. When told it was a painter's smock, the same coat produced no such effect. The costume alone shaped identity. You believe you are rehearsing a stable self, but in reality you are rehearsing costumes, outfits with no enduring character beneath. History amplifies this illusion. Think of the robes of kings, the armor of knights, the vestments of priests. Each costume promised divine authority, sacred purpose, eternal identity. Yet strip them away, and the character was only a man, frail, fleeting, forgotten. The costumes outlasted the people. The garments remain in museums, displayed as relics, while the characters are long erased. Costumes without characters, rehearsals without permanence. Philosophy sharpens the paradox. Hume argued that the self is nothing more than a bundle of perceptions, no stable character, only fleeting impressions strung together. In this view, the costume is not covering a self, but generating the illusion of one. The mind dresses itself in roles, thinker, doer, dreamer, but these are costumes worn in rehearsal, not permanent characters. When the costume falls, the character dissolves too. Even neuroscience supports this unsettling picture. Brain imaging shows that identity is not localized, but scattered across networks. Frontal cortex for planning, limbic system for feeling, parietal lobe for sense of space. Remove one part, and the character shifts. Alter chemistry, and personality changes. The self, rehearsed through neural costumes, dissolves under scrutiny. No singular character hides within. Only costumes endlessly rehearsing themselves. And yet, you cling to them. You iron the costumes of professionalism. You polish the costumes of kindness. You rehearse the costumes of wisdom. You hope these garments will reveal the truth of who you are. But the rehearsal never ends, and the costumes never settle into permanence. You may be admired for the uniform, the mask, the role, but admiration is for the costume, not for you. And if there is no you, then admiration itself rehearses emptiness. The recursive trap closes here. Even when you reject costumes, when you say, "I want to be my authentic self," you are rehearsing another costume, the costume of authenticity. Stripped down simplicity, unadorned language, bare living, but authenticity is only another garment, another role rehearsed in the rehearsal of life. You cannot escape the closet of costumes. Even rebellion is a mask. Imagine standing before a mirror, layering costume upon costume. At first, each feels like progress. Now you are a scholar, now a lover, now a leader. But after a while the weight grows unbearable, and you realize none of them conceal a core. Beneath every garment is only another garment, until finally there is nothing left to remove. Costumes without characters, performance without essence, rehearsal without end. Perhaps this is not tragedy, but truth. If life is only costumes, then you are free to change them endlessly, to rehearse new selves without fear of permanence. But the freedom is shadowed by futility. The costumes remain, but the characters do not. And when the curtain never rises, you are left asking, what is the meaning of rehearsing an identity that never existed? The silence answers, there was only ever the costume. The rehearsal was never meant to reveal a character. The costume was the role, the rehearsal was the performance, and emptiness was the only audience. Every movement in life feels like part of a larger dance. You rise from bed, you stretch, you step into routine, you walk in patterns traced by millions before you. You think these motions are leading somewhere, rehearsed for a purpose, choreographed into a final performance that will justify the effort. But what if the choreography leads nowhere? What if every practiced movement is only an endless circling, a dance without destination, rehearsed into the void? Consider the simple gestures that make up your day. The way you tie your shoes, stir your coffee, tap your fingers while waiting. Each feels small, but together they create a rhythm, a sequence, steps in a dance you don't realize you're performing. Yet there is no grand stage for these motions, no premiere where the pattern is revealed. The choreography begins and ends in itself, spinning circles that collapse into emptiness. Philosophy often seeks to impose purpose on motion. Aristotle imagined life as telos, directed toward a final cause, like a dance moving toward its climax. But modern thought disrupts this vision. Camus compared life to Sisyphus, condemned to push his stone in an endless loop. The choreography is the movement itself, not the destination. You dance not to arrive but to repeat, toward nowhere. Neuroscience echoes this futility. Motor programs in the brain function through loops, basal ganglia circuits repeating sequences until they stabilize. Walking, running, reaching, typing, each is a choreography rehearsed endlessly by neurons, refined but never completed. Your body does not know arrival, it only knows repetition. The choreography, however complex, loops back to its origin. History, too, is choreographed toward nowhere. Wars fought for empire collapse into ruins. Processions of kings fade into forgotten lines in dusty chronicles. Ritual dances performed for gods vanish into silence when belief evaporates. Whole civilizations rehearse their steps, marches, ceremonies, parades, only for the choreography to dissolve into rubble. The dance moves nowhere, yet it repeats across centuries. Think of modern life's patterns. Traffic streams flowing every morning, office workers rising and sitting in unison, billions scrolling through identical screens. The choreography is vast, synchronized, almost beautiful in its scope, yet it points nowhere. There is no grand finale to commuting, no ultimate resolution to email chains. The motions repeat as if rehearsed for an absent show, movements circling endlessly toward nothing. Psychology studies this endlessness in habit and compulsion, repetitive behaviors, compulsions in OCD, rituals in anxiety, mirror the choreography of life itself. The person repeats gestures, not because they achieve an end, but because the repetition is the end. The brain demands movement, rehearsal, choreography, even when it leads nowhere. Your life, too, is filled with such rituals, performed daily, rehearsed endlessly, justified only by their continuation. The paradox deepens when you realize how much beauty arises from these futile motions. Dance itself, in its purest form, does not arrive anywhere. It does not build or conquer or finish. It is a rehearsal made permanent, a performance that repeats without purpose. To dance is to embody motion without destination. Your life, seen from a distance, may be no different, a choreography rehearsed only to keep rehearsing. But this realization does not free you. Even knowing the dance leads nowhere, you continue to move, compelled to repeat, to practice, to step in rhythm. The rehearsal does not end, because you are the rehearsal. Your body, your mind, your world, they are choreographies looping into themselves. Even resistance is another step, another motion, another pattern rehearsed endlessly. Imagine standing in a vast hall, dancers moving in perfect synchrony, each convinced they are part of a story building to a climax. But the music never changes, the steps never shift. They are dancing in circles, and the circles widen into emptiness. You are one of those dancers, rehearsing toward nowhere, convinced for a moment that the dance will reveal meaning, until you realize the choreography is all there is. And yet, within this futility, there is a haunting grace. If the dance leads nowhere, then every step is its own completion. Every gesture, every practiced movement, is both rehearsal and performance. Nowhere is everywhere. The choreography that dissolves into emptiness is also the choreography that keeps you alive. But the recursion traps you again. Even as you accept that nowhere is the destination, you are rehearsing acceptance, choreographing your understanding, moving once more in circles. The rehearsal never ends. You cannot stop dancing. The choreography leads nowhere, but nowhere is where you are always going. Imagine stepping out beneath the spotlight. The stage is silent, the script trembling in your hands. You deliver your first line with care, expecting an echo of laughter, a sigh of recognition, applause at the end. But the theater is empty. No faces in the shadows, no eyes watching, no ears listening. You are rehearsing a monologue to vacant seats. This, some theories whisper, is the essence of life, to speak endlessly, only to be heard by no one. Every conversation you've ever had carries the hidden assumption of an audience. You speak so that another will hear, understand, respond. But neuroscience reminds us of a cruel twist. Even when words are heard, they are misinterpreted, distorted, forgotten. The audience you imagine may as well be absent. You are still performing a monologue to silence. Even in crowded rooms, your words dissolve before they land. Empty seats everywhere. Theatre depends on dialogue, the exchange of voices, the interplay of character and response. But in rehearsal, actors often begin with monologues, practicing alone, filling the air with lines no one answers. Life mirrors this rehearsal. You speak, you confess, you beg, you explain. But what answers you receive are echoes of your own voice, refracted back from the void. Your audience is never as present as you hope. Sometimes they are physically absent. Sometimes they are emotionally absent. Sometimes they are simply uninterested. Yet you keep rehearsing, as if one day the seats will fill. Philosophy offers no comfort. Kierkegaard once wrote of the single individual before God, the ultimate monologue, existence spoken to an infinite absence. Nietzsche replaced God with silence, leaving humanity speaking into emptiness with no eternal witness. Camus reduced it further: to speak is to shout into the absurd, and to receive no answer is the essence of the human condition. The monologue is the performance, and the seats remain empty. Psychology adds a strange twist. Research on inner speech shows that you talk to yourself constantly, rehearsing conversations, repeating imagined arguments, scripting dialogues that never occur. But this rehearsal is itself a monologue to empty seats. No one hears your inner voice. Even you forget most of what you tell yourself. Your brain is both actor and empty theatre, endlessly rehearsing lines to an audience that never arrives. History is filled with forgotten monologues. Think of letters never read, books unpublished, prayers whispered into silence. Think of monuments built for gods who no longer exist, of speeches shouted to crowds long dead. The voices once filled with urgency now rehearse themselves in dust. Empty seats witness them, and empty seats forget them. Humanity itself rehearses into silence, each generation speaking monologues that vanish. Yet, you cannot stop. The paradox binds you. Even knowing the seats are empty, you keep speaking. Perhaps you hope someone will enter the theatre. Perhaps you imagine your words will echo long enough to matter. Perhaps you rehearse because rehearsal itself has momentum. You cannot be silent. To live is to monologue, even when no one listens, especially when no one listens. Picture yourself sitting in a quiet room, speaking aloud a confession. The walls absorb your words, the floor swallows them, the ceiling scatters them. No one hears, but for a moment, you feel lighter. Why? Because the act of speaking rehearses itself as meaning, even without an audience. The empty seats are enough. The absence itself becomes a kind of witness, a silence that validates your voice by refusing to answer. And here lies the recursion. Even as you realize your life is a monologue to empty seats, you are still rehearsing these very thoughts, narrating them inwardly, imagining them heard by someone. You cannot escape the fantasy of an audience. Even when the theatre is bare, you keep rehearsing lines for listeners who will never arrive. So the stage remains lit, the monologue continues, and the seats stay empty. You are both actor and silence, voice and void. The rehearsal will never end, because the performance was never scheduled. You will keep speaking into absence, and absence will keep listening without listening. This is the play, and it is already over before it began. Applause is supposed to be the reward, the validation, the echo of meaning that tells you the performance mattered. The actor bows, the sound thunders, and for a moment the world confirms the effort. But even applause has its paradox, for once the clapping ends, there is only silence. That silence stretches longer than the applause itself, swallowing it whole. If life is rehearsal for nothing, then perhaps every burst of applause you imagine is already fading into its aftermath, the silence that proves how little it mattered. Think of your own small triumphs. A compliment, a promotion, a moment of recognition. They feel loud, resonant, like applause filling your private theatre. But within hours, days or weeks, the silence returns. People forget. You forget. The applause dissolves into memory, and the memory itself fades. The silence after applause is not the exception, it is the rule. The noise was only a brief rehearsal, and silence was the true performance. Psychology reveals how fleeting applause truly is. Research on hedonic adaptation shows that positive experiences, no matter how intense, quickly fade into baseline. A long-awaited victory, a life milestone, a great success, all feel profound in the moment. But the echo disappears faster than you expect. The applause dies, and silence resumes its reign. You rehearse endlessly for this brief noise, but the silence always lasts longer. Philosophy has its own way of whispering this truth. The Stoics urged indifference to praise, reminding us that applause is fickle, unreliable, shallow. Marcus Aurelius wrote that even emperors are forgotten within a few generations, their applause reduced to dust. Nietzsche mocked the craving for recognition as a symptom of weakness. To hunger for applause is to misunderstand life's rehearsal, for the silence after applause is inevitable, and it is in that silence you must live. Theatre itself embodies this paradox. The longest ovations end in silence. The loudest applause becomes memory. Performers return to their dressing rooms, wipe off the makeup, and face the emptiness of quiet hallways. The silence lasts hours, days, years. The applause lasts minutes. Yet still, actors rehearse endlessly for that fleeting sound. You too rehearse your life, as though applause will give it meaning. But silence, patient and infinite, waits to reclaim the stage. Neuroscience deepens the trap. Dopamine spikes in moments of recognition, but the brain cannot sustain that peak. The circuits are wired to reset, to crave again. The silence after applause is not failure but biology. You cannot hold applause forever. your brain forces it to fade. You live in cycles of craving, reward, silence, craving again. The rehearsal is endless, the silence inevitable. Imagine a grand concert hall. Thousands rise to their feet, applauding with thunderous force. The sound fills every corner, shaking the walls. Then, one by one, hands grow still. The clapping slows, dwindles, ends. What remains is not the sound but the absence. The silence is louder, more permanent, more true. Life itself is this concert, brief moments of noise rehearsed into oblivion, swallowed by the silence that follows. The paradox deepens. Silence after applause is not just absence but exposure. When the clapping ends, the performer is left alone, stripped of validation, forced to face the emptiness. You too face this after every small applause in your life. You realize that no recognition lasts, no praise sustains, no echo fills the void. The silence after applause is the true condition of existence. And yet, you keep rehearsing. You keep craving the noise, chasing the fleeting moment when the theater shakes. You know it will end, but you rehearse anyway. Perhaps this is the cruelest rehearsal of all, preparing for moments that dissolve, practicing lines for applause that will never last, bowing to silence disguised as recognition. But here is the recursion. Even as you reflect on the silence after applause, you are seeking applause for the thought. You hope someone will hear this realization, clap for your wisdom, validate your acceptance, and when they do, or even if they don't, the silence will come again. You cannot escape it. You can only rehearse into it, bow to it, dissolve inside it. So the applause fades. The silence endures. The rehearsal continues. And in that silence perhaps lies the only truth you will ever know. The performance was never about the noise. It was always about the emptiness waiting after. You have been told your whole life to follow directions, arrows painted on floors, instructions written on paper, advice whispered by elders, maps drawn by unseen hands. Directions give the illusion of progress, of movement toward a destination that will justify the journey. But what if every direction ultimately leads nowhere? What if the maps are illusions, the arrows circles, the advice empty rehearsals that never deliver you to arrival? Think of how carefully you have followed the lines laid out before you. Go to school, get a job, build a family, save for the future. Each step is drawn like stage directions in a script, guiding you from one scene to the next. But when you step back, you realize the path curves in loops, returning you to where you began. The directions were never toward a final performance. They were toward nowhere, rehearsed endlessly. Philosophy echoes this futility. Camus called life absurd precisely because every path ends in death. No matter which directions you take, toward wealth, toward wisdom, toward love, they all converge at the same vanishing point. The journey rehearses itself toward nothingness. Heidegger sharpened this truth by reminding us that being itself is always being toward death. The directions only delay, never escape, the silence at the end. Psychology adds its own irony. Experiments in goal setting show that humans thrive on having directions, even when the goals are arbitrary. People follow meaningless arrows, complete pointless puzzles, pursue rewards that vanish instantly. The brain rehearses itself into believing the directions matter, even when they lead nowhere. You are wired to obey signs, to crave guidance, to rehearse motion even in circles. Consider history's great journeys. Explorers set sail for new worlds, only to die at sea. Armies marched for glory, only to dissolve into forgotten graves. Pilgrims walked for salvation, only to discover silence at their holy sites. The directions promised transcendence, but each road ended in dust. The rehearsal was the walk itself, not the arrival. Nowhere was always the destination. Even modern life is rehearsed this way. GPS guides you down streets, but the destinations blur together, stores, offices, houses repeating endlessly. Career paths promise advancement, but promotions dissolve into repetition. Relationships chart new chapters, but each follows the same rehearsed patterns of beginning, middle, and end. You follow the directions faithfully, but they never escape the cycle. They only lead you deeper into rehearsal, deeper into nowhere. Neuroscience reveals why this trap persists. The brain is a prediction machine, constantly mapping directions, projecting paths forward. But most projections are wrong, discarded, forgotten. Your neurons rehearse possibilities endlessly, yet only a fraction unfold, and even those end in the same silence. The directions are comforting, but they do not lead to permanence. They are practice, rehearsal, circuitry spinning in loops. Imagine a labyrinth. At every corner, arrows point the way. You follow faithfully, turn after turn, certain you are closer to the exit. Hours pass, then days, then years. Finally, you realize there is no exit. The directions are not lies, but rehearsals. They were designed not to deliver you anywhere, but to keep you moving. The labyrinth is life itself. The directions were never meant to conclude. They were always toward nowhere. The paradox becomes sharper here. Even knowing the directions are empty, you still crave them. You want signs to follow, paths to walk, guidance to rehearse. To admit that directions lead nowhere is to face unbearable silence. So you rehearse new goals, new maps, new journeys, even when you know their destination is void. The act of following directions becomes its own performance, an endless rehearsal disguised as progress. And yet, perhaps there is a strange form of freedom in this realization. If all directions lead nowhere, then you cannot be lost. You cannot make a wrong turn. Every path, every arrow, every instruction is equally valid, because they all end in the same place, emptiness. The rehearsal is not about reaching but about moving, not about destination but about direction itself. But the recursion waits. Even if you embrace this truth, that nowhere is the only destination, you are still rehearsing the acceptance, still following the direction of letting go, still believing this path is different, and that too, leads nowhere. You cannot escape the rehearsal. You can only keep walking, keep following, keep rehearsing directions that dissolve into silence. So the arrows point on. The maps unfold. The advice continues. You obey, you move, you rehearse, and at the end, nowhere waits, as it always has. The rehearsal continues forever, and the only stage is the absence of arrival. Every play depends on a cast. Without other characters, the stage collapses into monotony. You rehearse your lines expecting someone else to answer, to move, to give your words weight. Yet life's rehearsal may be filled with nothing but imaginary others, characters you invent, project, or misremember, who never truly existed the way you thought they did. From the earliest years you build invisible companions, the friend you talk to in secret, the parent you imagine approving of your every move, the stranger you pretend is watching you from afar. These imagined roles rehearse themselves alongside you, shaping how you walk, how you speak, how you think, but none of them are stable. They dissolve when examined, slipping away like shadows from light. The cast you rely on may only be inventions in your own mind. Psychology confirms how deeply imagination shapes your others. Experiments in social cognition show that humans constantly simulate minds that aren't there. You rehearse conversations before they happen, picture reactions that never come, argue with voices that exist only inside your head. The cast is imaginary, yet you live as if they are real, as if the rehearsal is for them. But when the curtain rises, no one enters the stage. The audience, like the cast, is illusion. Even memory betrays you here. Studies on false memories prove that you can believe entirely in interactions that never occurred. You recall dialogues with friends that never happened, gestures of love or betrayal that were figments of suggestion. Your remembered cast is as unstable as your imagined one. The people you rehearse with may never have spoken the lines you attribute to them. Your play is populated by echoes, not presences. History, too, rehearses with imaginary casts. Nations are built on imagined communities, millions of people who will never meet, yet who are believed to share identity. Armies march under banners of collective illusion, rehearsing solidarity with comrades they will never know. Religions speak of saints, angels, ancestors, beings who rehearse alongside the living but remain unseen, unverifiable. Civilization itself is a rehearsal staged with invisible characters. Philosophy sharpens the wound. Sartre spoke of the look. The way another's gaze defines you, confirms you, imprisons you. But what if the gaze you feel is not real? What if you rehearse yourself before imaginary eyes, convincing yourself that you are seen when in truth no one is watching? Then your very identity is woven from hallucinated audiences. You rehearse roles for phantoms who will never applaud. Neuroscience adds to this paradox. The brain's theory of mind network activates even when imagining others who aren't there. These circuits fire when you picture conversations, when you feel judged, when you imagine comfort. Your neurons rehearse the presence of ghosts. The cast is conjured by your brain, but the stage remains empty. You are surrounded by people who may not exist in the way you think they do. Picture yourself at night, lying in bed, replaying the day. You rehearse arguments with co-workers, explanations to loved ones, confessions to friends, but none of them hear you. The cast is silent. Tomorrow, you may act as though they understood, but in truth, you rehearsed alone. The rehearsal hall is filled with cardboard cutouts, imaginary actors who will never speak back. And yet, the illusion is necessary. Without your imaginary cast, the play collapses into unbearable solitude. You need the presence of others, even if they are shadows. The paradox is cruel. You know the cast is unstable, but you cannot perform without them. You rehearse endlessly for imaginary partners, lines exchanged with ghosts who vanish before the curtain rises. But the recursion deepens. Even realizing this truth, you invent another cast, the imagined listener who will understand your realization, the phantom audience who will applaud your wisdom. You cannot stop conjuring others, even when you know they are not there. The rehearsal demands partners, and your mind will supply them, even if it must invent them from nothing. So the play continues. The stage fills with imagined faces, voices rehearsed into being, companions who dissolve into silence as quickly as they appear. You live surrounded by a cast of imaginary others, rehearsing lines that no one ever hears, acting for characters who were never real. And when the curtain fails to rise, when the rehearsal ends, you will discover the stage was empty all along. Every performance has its bright lights, the visible stage where actors deliver lines with clarity, but most of the work is done in shadows, behind curtains, in dim rehearsal halls, in the private corners of thought. Entire scenes are rehearsed that no one ever sees. Life, too, may be nothing more than this. Endless scenes rehearsed in shadows, hidden from others, hidden even from yourself, dissolving before they ever reach a stage. Think of how often you prepare conversations you never have. You replay what you should have said, what you will say, what you might say if the chance comes. These shadow scenes fill your inner theater, but they rarely move into daylight. They remain in rehearsal, looping endlessly, shaping your feelings more than the words you actually speak. You live as much in shadow rehearsals as in public performance. Perhaps more. Psychology shows how powerful these hidden rehearsals can be. Cognitive science calls it simulation. The brain practices actions in the imagination long before they occur. Athletes visualize winning. Speakers rehearse speeches silently. The anxious replay catastrophes that never happen. These simulations prime neural pathways, shaping behavior, but most remain unrealized. The shadows dominate, while the stage stays empty. History is built on such unseen rehearsals. Wars, revolutions, discoveries, all were preceded by shadow scenes of planning, hesitation, failure. For every declaration remembered, countless drafts were written and destroyed. For every performance that became history, 1,000 rehearsals hid in shadows, forgotten. Civilization itself may be a pile of discarded scripts, the shadows of what never reached daylight. Philosophy, too, recognizes this realm of the unseen. Plato's allegory of the cave suggested humans mistake shadows for reality, rehearsing life against flickering illusions. Nietzsche described thought as a rehearsal, a shadow dance before action. Kierkegaard warned that dread arises in the shadows of possibility, where endless rehearsals paralyze choice. You are never only on the stage, you are mostly in rehearsal, in the shadows, never arriving at the moment of light. Even neuroscience reveals the dominance of shadows. Brain imaging shows that imagined movements activate nearly the same regions as real ones. Your body rehearses silently in the dark, firing neurons as though acting. The shadows leave imprints indistinguishable from performance. Your mind cannot tell rehearsal from reality. It lives equally in both. But the shadow scenes are never witnessed, never applauded. They dissolve into private silence. Picture yourself walking through a crowded street. Outwardly, you are quiet, anonymous. Inwardly, you are rehearsing dozens of shadow scenes, arguments, triumphs, confessions, regrets. No one sees them, but they shape your pace, your posture, your mood. You are acting in shadows, staging invisible dramas that will never be performed. To everyone else, you are silent, but inside, the theater never stops. The paradox is that these shadow rehearsals often matter more than the visible stage. The scenes you never perform linger longer in memory, haunting you with what-ifs. The words you never said, the choices you never made, the moments you rehearsed in shadows, they echo more deeply than what actually occurred. The shadows become the play, and the stage is an afterthought. And yet, even as you realize this, you cannot escape. You return to the shadows again and again, rehearsing, preparing, replaying. Even when you tell yourself you are living authentically, you are rehearsing another shadow scene, how authenticity should look, how it should feel. The trap is recursive. The shadows are infinite, and every attempt to escape them becomes another rehearsal in the dark. Imagine a vast theatre with no lights, only silhouettes. Actors move, but no one sees them clearly. Scripts are spoken, but no one hears the lines. The entire play unfolds in dimness, rehearsed endlessly without illumination. That theatre is your life. You may long for the spotlight, but most of your existence will remain in rehearsal, in shadows, unseen. Perhaps this is the truest form of performance. Not the stage, not the applause, not the memory, but the unseen rehearsal that never ends. The shadows do not betray you, they define you. You are a creature of rehearsals, endlessly staging scenes that dissolve into darkness. And so you continue. You rehearse tomorrow's conversations, replay yesterday's mistakes, invent futures that may never arrive. Each scene dissolves in shadow, unseen, unrecorded, unfinished. The performance never comes. The rehearsal is all there is, and the shadows remain faithful, endless, waiting for your next line. Every performance begins with a script, words etched on paper, directions that guide motion, arcs that give structure. But what if the scripts of existence are written, rehearsed, and then forgotten before they are ever performed? What if the life you live is guided not by permanence, but by scripts erased as quickly as they appear? Then existence itself becomes a rehearsal of amnesia, lines rehearsed, lost, and rehearsed again. Think about your earliest memories. Few survive. The script of your childhood, the lines spoken, the roles rehearsed is gone. You may cling to fragments, but the vast majority has dissolved. Whole acts of your life have already been forgotten, erased before they could ever be performed on the stage of consciousness. What remains is not the script itself, but a faint echo, an illusion of continuity. Psychology has long studied this vanishing. Hermann Ebbinghaus mapped the forgetting curve, showing how quickly memory fades. Within days, most detail is lost. Neuroscience deepens the insight. The hippocampus rehearses experiences into memory, but most scripts are discarded, never consolidated. Your brain edits existence like a ruthless director, cutting scenes you thought mattered. The rehearsal is endless, the scripts forgotten. Philosophy whispers the same truth. Hume argued the self is only a bundle of perceptions, but if most perceptions are forgotten, then most of your supposed self is absent. Nietzsche suggested that forgetting is not a weakness but a strength, necessary for survival. Yet if forgetting defines existence, then perhaps existence itself is only a rehearsal of scripts that vanish, never fixed, never complete. History is also a graveyard of forgotten scripts. Empires rehearsed laws, ceremonies, performances of power, most are gone. The scripts of slaves, peasants, ordinary lives, never written, never remembered. Humanity's vast rehearsal has dissolved into silence, with only fragments preserved. You live not on solid foundations, but atop forgotten scripts, echoes erased by time. Consider the scripts you still cling to, the promises you made but never kept, the plans you rehearsed but abandoned, the stories you told yourself about who you would be. Each was a script of existence, rehearsed as though it mattered, then forgotten in the tide of days. And yet, for a time they guided you. They shaped choices, feelings, even identities, before vanishing. Forgotten, but not meaningless. Forgotten, yet rehearsed into you. Neuroscience reveals how fragile even memory's survivors are. False memory experiments show people confidently recall words never spoken, events never lived. Your remembered script may not be the one you rehearsed. It may be an invention, a reconstruction, a phantom line written after the fact. The scripts of existence are not only forgotten, they are rewritten by absence, edited into illusions. Imagine a theatre littered with discarded pages. Actors pick up fragments, rehearse a few lines, then drop them again. None of the scripts are finished. None are performed in full. The stage is covered in forgotten words, scattered roles, abandoned directions. This is your life, a rehearsal of half scripts, unfinished acts, forgotten cues. And yet, there is paradoxical meaning here. If the scripts are forgotten, then you are not bound to them. You can rehearse anew again and again, without the weight of permanence. Forgetting frees you to improvise, to inhabit new lines, to change roles endlessly. The rehearsal is not for performance, but for the act of rehearsing itself. But the recursion deepens. Even as you embrace forgetting, you are rehearsing a new script, the script of acceptance, the script of wisdom, and that too will be forgotten. You cannot escape the cycle. The forgotten scripts are not mistakes, they are the essence of existence. You rehearse lines only to erase them, and the erasure is the only permanence you will ever know. So existence continues, a stage where scripts are written, rehearsed, and dissolved before they are ever performed. You may search for meaning in permanence, but permanence does not exist here. There are only forgotten scripts, endless rehearsal, silence, and in that silence, perhaps, lies the truest performance of all. What is a performance without a witness? You step into a role, you speak your lines, you gesture with conviction, yet no one is there to see, no applause follows, no critique arrives, no recognition affirms. It is the ultimate rehearsal, acting out without witness, performing into emptiness, rehearsing lines for no ear but your own. From childhood, you are trained to expect witnesses. Parents clap when you walk, teachers nod when you recite, peers laugh when you tell stories. You learn to act with the assumption that someone is watching. Yet many of your most intense performances, your silent struggles, your private victories, your late-night confessions, have no witnesses at all. They vanish as soon as they occur, unrecorded, unrecalled, unseen. Life rehearses itself endlessly, but without an audience. The performance dissolves into nothing. Psychology confirms this strange truth. Experiments on self-observation show that people behave differently when they believe they are watched, even if the watcher is imaginary. A simple picture of eyes on the wall can change behavior. Yet when no witness exists, actions lose that layer of performance. You act, but no one sees. You rehearse, but no one records. Your gestures vanish into emptiness, forgotten before they land. Philosophy has long feared and embraced this absence. Kierkegaard imagined life as lived before God, the eternal witness who makes every act meaningful. But Nietzsche declared that God was dead, leaving humanity alone on the stage, acting out with no one in the seats. Camus went further. The absurd arises precisely because there is no witness, no cosmic gaze to validate the performance. You act anyway, endlessly, knowing no one sees. History magnifies the paradox. Billions have lived, acted, struggled, triumphed, and were never witnessed. Their names erased, their stories unrecorded. Entire civilizations rehearsed themselves into oblivion, their performances unseen, forgotten. You too will act out much of your existence without witness. Your days, your words, your gestures will vanish, unrehearsed for history, unseen by others, lost even to yourself. Neuroscience deepens the void. Memory is selective, fragile, inconsistent. Even when you witness your own acts, you forget them quickly. The hippocampus rehearses experience into memory, but most are discarded. In a sense, you are not even the witness of your own life. You act out, but your brain erases the record. The performance is real, but the witness is absent. Picture yourself alone in a room, speaking aloud. You rehearse apologies, arguments, dreams. Your words fill the air, but no one hears them. Not even you. Once they fade, you may imagine an invisible witness. But imagination itself is rehearsal, not presence. You are acting out without witness, a performer rehearsing endlessly in silence. The paradox grows sharper here. Without a witness, failure does not matter. No one saw. But equally, without a witness, success is meaningless. No one saw that either. You are free from judgment, but you are also free from recognition. The performance collapses into rehearsal. The rehearsal collapses into nothing. And yet, you cannot stop. Even when unwatched, you keep acting. You still arrange your face in mirrors, still rehearse words in solitude, still walk as though someone notices. You act out without witness, because acting is what life does. Witness or not, the performance continues. Perhaps this is the essence of freedom, to act without needing a witness, to rehearse without longing for applause. Or perhaps it is the essence of futility, to act endlessly, knowing it will vanish, unseen. The paradox cannot be solved. You live it daily, in silence, in absence, in emptiness. But recursion traps you again. Even as you think, I am acting without witness, you imagine someone reading these words, hearing your realization, validating your awareness. You invent a phantom witness to escape the void, and that phantom too is only rehearsal. You cannot escape. You are always acting, always unwitnessed, always rehearsing lines into emptiness. So the curtain never rises, the seats remain empty, the stage stays silent. You act, you speak, you live, and no one sees. Acting out without witness is not a rare condition. It is existence itself. The essence of dialogue is exchange, voices, meeting, thoughts, intertwining, meaning created in the space between. But what if every dialogue you rehearse, every line you deliver, every question you ask, is ultimately lost to silence? What if the words never truly connect, never arrive, never survive? Then life itself becomes a rehearsal of conversations rehearsed into nothing, dialogues swallowed before they can echo. Think of the countless dialogues you have staged in your mind. You picture telling someone how much they mean to you, rehearsing each phrase carefully. You imagine the arguments you will make, the defenses you will offer, the stories you will tell. Yet, how often do these dialogues remain unspoken? They dissolve in silence, rehearsed but never performed. Your life is littered with conversations lost before they began. Psychology confirms how fragile dialogue really is. Research on miscommunication shows that even when words are exchanged, they rarely transmit exactly what was intended. Listeners misinterpret, filter, forget. What you rehearsed carefully is not what is received. The dialogue becomes rehearsal again. Silence masquerading as connection. Your words may reach ears, but they vanish before they take root. Even history records this silence. Letters unread, messages destroyed, conversations lost in translation. Entire cultures rehearsed dialogues with gods, with the dead, with futures that never arrived. Those words are gone now, erased into the silence of time. What remains are fragments, partial exchanges, echoes without substance. Humanity itself is a rehearsal of dialogues lost to silence. Philosophy offers its own echo. Martin Buber described existence as unfolding through the I-thou relationship, dialogue with another that makes being real, but silence undermines this. If the thou never answers, the dialogue collapses into an I-it, a monologue disguised as exchange. Sartre sharpened the despair. Even when others speak, you can never truly know their meanings. Dialogue pretends to connect, but silence reigns underneath. Neuroscience uncovers the same fragility. Studies of auditory processing reveal how much of speech is filtered unconsciously. Whole sentences are ignored. Sounds vanish before the brain registers them. Even when dialogue occurs, silence eats away at it, erasing more than it preserves. You are rehearsing words into a void, convincing yourself you are heard when in truth, most of what you say never lands. Imagine sitting across from someone you love. You speak, your heart laid bare. They nod, smile, perhaps respond. Yet within days the memory fades. Within years it is gone entirely. The dialogue that felt life-defining has dissolved into silence. It is as though it never happened, except in the rehearsal halls of your mind, and even there the lines blur and vanish. The paradox deepens. If dialogues are lost to silence, why speak at all? Why rehearse words that will vanish? And yet, you cannot stop. You continue to talk, to argue, to confess, to pray. You speak into silence, because silence itself demands rehearsal. You are compelled to fill it, even knowing it will erase everything you offer. Perhaps there is a strange beauty in this futility. A dialogue lost to silence is not meaningless. It existed, even briefly. It shaped you, even as it disappeared. Like a rehearsal, the act mattered, even if no premiere followed. The silence that swallowed it does not negate its reality. It only proves its impermanence. The dialogue was real in its rehearsal, even if no echo remains. But recursion traps you again. Even in recognizing this truth, you imagine sharing it, turning it into another dialogue. You picture someone hearing, understanding, nodding. Yet that imagined dialogue will also dissolve into silence. Even your awareness rehearses itself into absence. You cannot escape the rehearsal. You can only continue whispering lines that vanish as soon as they are spoken. So life continues. Endless conversations rehearsed in private, half-spoken exchanges forgotten, dialogues that never arrive. What you thought was connection was rehearsal. What you thought was permanence was silence. And in that silence, the rehearsal continues. Infinite, unfinished, unheard. Every actor waits for a cue, the signal that tells them to enter, to speak, to act. Without it, the performance cannot move forward. You rehearse your lines, prepare your gestures, but you linger in the wings, waiting for the moment that never arrives. What if life itself is this endless waiting, a rehearsal of anticipation, poised for cues that never come, scenes that never begin? From the beginning, you are told to wait for cues. As a child, you wait to grow. As a student, you wait to graduate. As an adult, you wait for success, recognition, love. Each stage feels like rehearsal, building toward a future that will give the cue to begin truly living. Yet time passes, and the cue does not come. You find yourself perpetually backstage, waiting, preparing, rehearsing, forever expecting the signal that will never sound. Psychology calls this delay discounting, the tendency to defer present fulfillment for future reward. You tell yourself the cue will arrive if only you endure, but research shows that many rewards never materialize. The marshmallow experiment proved how deeply humans tie their actions to waiting. Yet waiting is not the same as arrival. You rehearse restraint, patience, sacrifice, but often the curtain never rises. Philosophy echoes this trap. Kierkegaard spoke of deferred life, where individuals postpone existence until conditions feel right, but conditions are never perfect, so life is perpetually delayed. Heidegger added his warning: we are beings who await death itself, the only certain cue. All other signals, success, meaning, transcendence, may never come. Waiting becomes the performance. The rehearsal becomes all there is. Neuroscience reveals how the brain itself is wired for cues. Dopamine circuits fire in anticipation, often more strongly than when rewards are received. Your body rehearses excitement endlessly, always leaning forward, never landing. The cue is more powerful than the line, but the line never comes. The cue is more powerful than the line, but the line never comes. You wait again and again, rehearsing the moment of beginning that never begins. History rehearses this futility. Generations have waited for messiahs who never arrived, revolutions that never came, futures that never dawned. Entire cultures lived in expectation, rehearsing rituals, sacrifices, prayers, waiting for cues written in the sky. But the sky remained silent. The rehearsal stretched across centuries. Waiting was the performance, and nothing followed. Picture yourself standing in the wings of a vast stage. The curtain trembles. You grip your script tightly, rehearsing the first line again and again. You listen for the cue, the music, the signal, the word. It never comes. The stage remains dark. Still, you do not leave. You stay, endlessly ready, endlessly waiting. This is the play, not action, not performance, but perpetual anticipation. The paradox deepens. Waiting for a cue feels necessary, as though to act without it would be wrong, meaningless, absurd. Yet the absence of cues means you never act at all. You live as if preparing, but the preparation never transitions. You are both frozen and restless, rehearsing action while never stepping forward. And yet, you cannot stop waiting. Even when you recognize the futility, you search for signals. You interpret coincidences as omens, mistakes as signs, silence as a hidden message. You invent cues because the absence is unbearable. But the cues you invent are themselves rehearsals, illusions meant to keep you in motion. You are waiting still, only now pretending you have begun. Perhaps there is a strange grace in this endless anticipation. If the cue never arrives, then every moment of waiting becomes the play itself, the suspense, the tension, the rehearsal of readiness. These are the performance. You are not backstage. You are already acting, even as you wait. The absence of the cue is the cue. But recursion closes the circle. Even as you accept this, you are rehearsing acceptance, waiting for the validation of understanding. You wait for the moment when the realization will be complete, when the silence will resolve. That, too, is a cue that never comes. You are still waiting, still rehearsing, still lingering in the wings. So life continues. The cues do not arrive. The curtain does not rise. You wait, and wait, and wait, and perhaps, when the end comes, you will realize the waiting was all there ever was. Life was not the performance after the cue. Life was the rehearsal of waiting itself. Practice is supposed to lead somewhere. You rehearse to improve, to prepare, to get ready for the real thing. But what if the real thing never comes? What if every ounce of practice, every repetition, every careful adjustment is only building toward nothing? Then life itself becomes endless practice before nothing, a rehearsal that never transitions, a performance rehearsed for a stage that does not exist. Think of the patterns of your days. You practice patience, practice strength, practice endurance. You rehearse kindness, rehearse ambition, rehearse resilience. Each time you believe these rehearsals are shaping you for a decisive moment, an exam, a relationship, a chance at greatness. But when that moment comes, It is smaller than you imagined, or it never comes at all. You practiced endlessly, only to discover there was no performance waiting. The rehearsal was the whole story. Psychology reveals the pull of this cycle. Habit research shows that repetition conditions the brain to act without reflection. But habits are not ladders to higher existence. They are loops. You practice not to arrive but to repeat. The neural grooves deepen. The behavior stabilizes, but no grand unveiling occurs. Endless practice is itself the destination, though you keep imagining something more. Philosophy has long traced this futility. Camus described Sisyphus pushing his stone endlessly, never arriving. Nietzsche imagined eternal recurrence, every act rehearsed forever without progress. The point is not to finish, but to continue. Life becomes not a journey but a cycle, not a performance but endless practice. Nothing waits beyond the repetition, yet the repetition itself never ends. History rehearses the same truth. Empires drill armies, build monuments, draft laws, only to collapse into dust. Generations practice rituals, prayers, sacrifices, only to vanish into silence. None of it resolves. Each rehearsal feeds into another, which dissolves into nothing. Humanity practices endlessly, yet the final performance never arrives. The show is cancelled before it begins, and still the rehearsal continues. Neuroscience shows why. The brain's plasticity ensures you are always practicing, reshaping circuits, refining actions. But this plasticity has no endpoint. The brain never declares enough. The performance is ready. You are rewiring until you die. Endless practice is not a prelude. It is the essence of being. The nothing that follows is the silence of death, erasing all rehearsal. Picture yourself in a rehearsal hall. You repeat a line dozens of times, waiting for the director to call. Good, that's the one. But the director never speaks. You repeat again, and again, and again, until exhaustion blurs the words. The practice continues without judgment, without conclusion, without transition. When you collapse, the hall remains silent. No curtain rises. That is your life. Endless practice before nothing. The paradox is suffocating and liberating. If practice leads nowhere, then failure does not matter. There is no final test to fail. But equally, success is meaningless. There is no final performance to win. Every effort is swallowed by the rehearsal itself, erased before it can be crowned. You practice endlessly, knowing it leads only to silence. And yet, you cannot stop. Even now, as you reflect on futility, you are practicing thought, rehearsing understanding, preparing insight, as though someone will judge it. You cannot escape practice. Even rejection of practice is practice. The rehearsal has no outside. It is all there is. Perhaps there is strange comfort here. If practice is endless and nothing follows, then practice is both means and end. The gestures, the repetitions, the cycles, these are the performance. There is nothing more, but nothing more is needed. Life is practice, and practice is all you will ever know. But recursion tightens the trap. Even as you accept this, you are practicing acceptance, rehearsing detachment, preparing to embody wisdom. You hope to perfect, even the realization of futility. That too is practice before nothing. You cannot finish. You cannot complete. You can only continue rehearsing until silence arrives. So you practice again tomorrow. You repeat words, repeat motions, repeat hopes. And when the end comes, you will discover the final truth. The performance was never scheduled. You practiced endlessly, and nothing followed. The rehearsal was all there ever was. Every performance assumes a stage. Even the smallest act of life, walking into a room, speaking your mind, daring to love, feels grounded by the belief that there is a platform beneath your feet, a setting that makes your actions matter. But what happens when the stage itself disappears? What if the very ground of performance vanishes, leaving you suspended in emptiness? Then all of life becomes rehearsal upon a stage that was never really there. Think of moments when certainty dissolved. A job you thought would last collapsed without warning. A relationship you believed in ended abruptly. A role you rehearsed for years no longer existed. The stage was pulled away, and you were left still speaking your lines into void. Life provides no guarantee that the platform beneath you will hold. The stage itself is rehearsal, temporary, fragile, always threatening to vanish. Philosophy has long circled this abyss. Heidegger warned of groundlessness, the realization that being itself has no stable foundation. Sartre spoke of nothingness as the core of existence, the hollow beneath every role. Nietzsche tore down the divine stage, declaring God dead, leaving humanity adrift with no cosmic theatre to anchor its performance. Each thinker rehearsed the same conclusion. The stage is not permanent, it is illusion, and it vanishes when you look closely. Psychology echoes this fragility. Identity depends on context. The stage of family, culture, society. Remove that stage, and identity falters. Studies of exile, isolation, trauma show how quickly the sense of self collapses when the stage shifts. You rehearse your lines confidently when the scenery is stable, but when it changes, the role dissolves. Without the stage, the actor stumbles, lost in rehearsal with no direction. History demonstrates the same truth. Entire civilizations believed their stage eternal. Rome, Egypt, Babylon. Their monuments and laws seemed unshakable, but every stage vanished, swallowed by time. The actors rehearsed grand performances, convinced their platform was indestructible, yet the ruins remind us, no stage survives. The rehearsal hall of history is littered with vanished platforms. Neuroscience offers a quieter perspective. The brain constructs reality through sensory input, stitching together a stage that feels solid. But this stage is fragile. Under hallucination, dream, or neurological disorder, the world dissolves. The stage you trusted vanishes in an instant, replaced by confusion. Your most basic perception is rehearsal, a temporary scaffolding that can collapse without warning. Imagine standing on a grand stage. Lights shine, curtains open, the audience waits. You begin your lines. Then, suddenly the boards beneath you dissolve, the scenery evaporates, the audience fades into mist. You are left floating in emptiness, still speaking, still rehearsing, but with no ground to anchor you. That is the human condition, performing on a stage that can vanish at any moment. The paradox is haunting. Without a stage, performance loses its frame, its context, its meaning. Yet without a stage, you are free from boundaries. If nothing grounds you, then you can move anywhere. But this freedom is inseparable from terror. The vanishing stage liberates and destroys. You are rehearsing lines without a theatre, gestures without a scene, meaning without a frame. And yet, you continue. Even knowing the stage is unstable, you act as though it is permanent. You rehearse careers, relationships, identities, all balanced on platforms that will not last. You cling to scenery that shifts like sand. The rehearsal persists, though the stage is already vanishing beneath you. Perhaps this is the truth you must face, that the stage was never real, only a rehearsal hall dressed in illusions. Every platform, society, self, memory, will dissolve. What remains is the rehearsal itself, endless, groundless, unfinished. The vanishing stage is not failure, it is the essence of existence. But recursion tightens the loop. Even as you accept the stage is vanishing, you rehearse acceptance as though it were a new stage, a firmer ground. Yet that too dissolves. You cannot escape the rehearsal. You can only act, speak, move, while the floor falls away, while the curtains dissolve, while the stage vanishes beneath you. So you perform without ground, rehearse without platform, live without permanence. The stage disappears, the rehearsal continues, and emptiness remains faithful. The performance never arrives, because the stage itself was never truly there. The spotlight is supposed to signal importance. When it shines, it means something is happening, something worth watching, something that matters. But what if the spotlight shines, and there is no show? What if the light pours down on emptiness, illuminating a stage where no script is performed, no actors appear, no meaning unfolds? Then life itself becomes a spotlight without a show, a bright focus on nothing at all. Think of the moments when attention falls on you. The job interview, the wedding toast, the unexpected recognition in a crowded room. The spotlight is real, you feel its heat, its intensity, but afterward the moment dissolves. The words you spoke are forgotten, the feelings fade, the recognition vanishes. The spotlight was there, but the show was absent. You rehearsed endlessly, but nothing lasting emerged. Psychology reveals the strange futility of attention. Research on fame and recognition shows that being noticed does not create fulfillment. Celebrities describe the spotlight as hollow, bright, consuming, but empty at its core. Neuroscience deepens this paradox. The brain's dopamine spikes at attention, but falls quickly, leaving emptiness behind. The spotlight is intoxicating, but the show never arrives. It is rehearsal masquerading as performance. Philosophy anticipated this emptiness. Sartre argued that to be looked at is to be reduced to an object. The spotlight pins you down, but it does not affirm your essence. Nietzsche mocked the craving for attention as weakness, a hunger for illusion. Camus suggested the spotlight itself is absurd. It reveals nothing, yet it continues to shine. The show you imagined under its glow never comes. History rehearses the same futility. Leaders, actors, thinkers stood in spotlights of their own time, celebrated, worshipped, applauded. Yet centuries later, their shows are gone, their scripts forgotten, only fragments remain. Stripped of context, the spotlight illuminated them briefly, but the stage was empty all along, their performance dissolved into dust, leaving only the memory of light. Neuroscience adds another layer. The brain's attentional systems filter more than they reveal. What you focus on feels like the spotlight, yet most of reality remains unseen. You mistake the bright beam for the whole stage, but it is only a fraction. Even in your own mind, the spotlight shines on fragments, leaving the rest rehearsed into oblivion. The show you think you are living is partial, incomplete, unfinished. Imagine a theater where the spotlight is fixed on the center stage. The light is blinding, intense, unwavering, but nothing happens in the beam. No actors enter, no script unfolds. The light burns into emptiness, and the audience grows restless before leaving. The spotlight remains, but the show never comes. That theater is your life, moments of illumination without meaning, attention without performance, rehearsal without conclusion. The paradox is sharp. Without spotlight, performance feels unseen, meaningless. But with spotlight, you realize the absence of substance. The light promises revelation, but it reveals nothing. You rehearse endlessly for a glow that delivers emptiness. The spotlight is not proof of a show, it is proof of its absence. And yet, you cannot stop chasing it. You prepare speeches, polish appearances, rehearse roles, all for the chance to stand in the beam. You hope the light will validate you, confirm your existence. But even when it shines, you are left unsatisfied. The spotlight cannot provide what does not exist. The show was never written. Perhaps there is liberation here. If the spotlight reveals nothing, then you are free to stop rehearsing for it. You can live outside the beam, in shadows, without expectation. The rehearsal remains, but the illusion of the show dissolves. The emptiness becomes visible. But recursion waits. Even as you reject the spotlight, you imagine yourself rejecting it in the spotlight of your own thoughts, rehearsing the refusal, performing authenticity for an invisible audience. You cannot escape. The spotlight follows you, even when you claim you do not need it. And still, the show does not appear. So you live beneath the glow, speaking lines no one remembers, acting roles that dissolve. The light is real, but the performance is not. The spotlight shines without show, and life continues as endless rehearsal in its beam. Purpose is the promise that rehearsal will someday matter. You tell yourself the lines you memorize, the roles you inhabit, the sacrifices you make, are all building towards something. A reason, a meaning, a grand unveiling that will justify the practice. But what if the purpose itself is hollow? What if you are rehearsing for meaning that does not exist? Then every act becomes a rehearsal of hollow purpose, motions performed with conviction, but anchored in emptiness. Think of how often you justify effort with imagined meaning. You wake early, work late, endure hardship, all because you believe it is for something. Yet the something keeps shifting. When you arrive, the purpose dissolves. The diploma leads to another exam, the job to another deadline, the relationship to another rehearsal of stability. Each goal achieved reveals itself as hollow, requiring new rehearsal. The purpose was never full, it was a shell, and you rehearsed within it. Psychology reinforces this illusion. Studies on motivation show that people are more driven by the promise of purpose than by its fulfillment. Anticipation fuels effort, but arrival disappoints. Purpose functions like a placeholder, a scaffolding for practice. Once examined closely, it collapses. You were not moving toward meaning, you were rehearsing for an illusion. Philosophy sharpens the point. Camus declared life absurd because purpose is always invented, never inherent. Sartre suggested you must create your own meaning, yet acknowledged the weight of its arbitrariness. Nietzsche mocked hollow morality, calling it a rehearsal of herd values with no foundation. Each philosopher circled the same abyss. Purpose is a costume hollow inside, worn to justify endless rehearsal. History is filled with such hollowness. Nations build themselves on sacred missions, destiny, empire, progress, only for centuries to reveal the futility. Individuals devote their lives to causes, religions, ideologies that later dissolve. What once seemed full of meaning is exposed as hollow, a rehearsal for nothing. Humanity keeps repeating this, generation after generation, practicing belief in purposes that vanish. Neuroscience adds another dimension. The brain's reward system drives behavior through imagined goals, but fulfillment rarely satisfies. Dopamine surges before achievement, then fades instantly. Purpose, biologically, is rehearsal fuel. It does not exist as a stable end. The circuits rehearse anticipation endlessly, creating hollow purposes to keep you moving. You live rehearsing goals that dissolve on contact. Picture a grand rehearsal hall. Actors pace, reciting lines passionately, convinced they are preparing for a profound performance. But no script exists. The director never arrives. The purpose of their labor is hollow, but they rehearse anyway. That is your existence. Endless conviction poured into preparation, with nothing solid waiting beyond. The paradox is cruel. Without purpose, rehearsal feels meaningless. But with hollow purpose, rehearsal still leads nowhere. You live caught between emptiness and illusion, compelled to keep practicing. You cannot act without imagining a reason, but the reasons never hold. Every purpose collapses into another rehearsal, another emptiness. And yet, you cannot stop. You invent new goals, new meanings, new promises to justify effort. You rehearse careers, relationships, philosophies, all under the guise of purpose. Even when you admit purpose is hollow, you rehearse that admission as if it grants meaning. You practice authenticity, practice acceptance, practice awareness. All purpose is hollow in their own way. Perhaps there is a strange grace in this hollowness. If purpose is empty, then you are free to fill it however you wish. The rehearsal itself becomes the point, not arrival, not justification, but repetition. The hollow shell of purpose allows you to keep moving, to keep rehearsing. The play was never written, but you act anyway. But recursion deepens. Even embracing purposelessness becomes a kind of purpose, another rehearsal for hollow meaning. You cannot escape. Each attempt to resolve the emptiness becomes another line spoken into the void, another role rehearsed in a theater without a stage. So you live rehearsing hollow purposes, endlessly convinced, endlessly disillusioned. The scripts you follow dissolve, the goals vanish, the meaning empties, and still, you practice. Because rehearsal was never leading anywhere, it was always the whole performance, hollow at its core, echoing into silence. Every audition carries hope. You step forward, script in hand, ready to prove yourself. You perform lines with trembling precision, imagining the role that waits if you succeed. Yet the audition is fragile, uncertain. Many try, few are chosen. But what if the cruelest truth is this? There is no role. What if you are endlessly auditioning for parts that do not exist, rehearsing for performances that will never be cast? Then life itself becomes one long audition for no role at all. Think about how much of your existence feels like preparation to be chosen. You dress carefully for interviews, rehearse words for relationships, polish skills for opportunities. Each effort is an audition, a plea. See me, choose me, give me a role. But often, the role never comes. Or worse, it never existed. You were practicing for a place that was never written into the script. Psychology reveals how deep this illusion runs. Studies of social belonging show humans constantly seek approval, adjusting behavior to fit imagined roles in groups. You audition to be friend, lover, leader, follower. Yet groups shift, expectations dissolve, memories fade. The roles you thought you were competing for vanish. You rehearsed endlessly, but there was no stage waiting. Philosophy sharpens the edge. Sartre argued existence precedes essence, that no roles are given to you. You must invent them. But even invention is arbitrary, unstable, dissolving. Camus saw the audition itself as absurd, a performance staged before silence, judged by no one. Nietzsche mocked the hunger for approval as weakness, a rehearsal of dependence on absent authorities. If roles are hollow, then auditions are for ghosts. History provides endless examples. Generations auditioned for religious salvation, hoping their rehearsals would earn eternal roles in heaven. Others auditioned for status, for power, for remembrance, only to be erased by time. Empires collapse, names vanish, monuments crumble. Billions auditioned, but most roles never existed. Humanity itself rehearses in a theater with no casting call. Neuroscience complicates the story further. The brain's social circuits, mirror neurons, reward pathways, fire as if approval were survival itself. You feel validated when chosen, devastated when rejected. Yet both feelings are rehearsals, fleeting chemical surges. The audition dominates your inner life. But the role is never real. You are wired to perform for absence, auditioning for no role at all. Imagine standing in a long line outside a theatre. Everyone holds scripts, reciting lines nervously, hoping to be called. Hours pass, days, years. The door never opens. The casting director never appears. Still, the line rehearses, voices echoing endlessly. That is your existence. Perpetual audition for roles that will never be announced. The paradox is sharp. Without roles, the audition seems meaningless. But without auditions, life loses motion. You need the illusion of a part to keep rehearsing, even when none exist. You act as if the casting call is real, though deep down you know the theatre is empty. The audition itself is the performance. The rejection is already written. And yet, you cannot stop. You audition for love, hoping to be chosen. You audition for recognition, hoping to be remembered. You audition for meaning, hoping the void will grant you a role. Each attempt fails, but you return again, lines trembling on your lips. The rehearsal continues because the alternative silence is unbearable. Perhaps there is strange liberation here. If there are no roles, then you are free from judgment. You cannot be cast wrongly if there is no casting at all. You can improvise endlessly, rehearse without expectation, live without script. The audition for no role becomes the performance itself. But recursion tightens. Even embracing freedom becomes another audition. Auditioning for authenticity, for enlightenment, for acceptance of futility. You cannot escape. The audition repeats, infinite, rehearsed for nothing. So you continue, standing in line, script in hand, voice rehearsed. The casting director never arrives. The roles never exist. The audition is endless, hollow, unfinished. And perhaps that was the point all along. There was never a role, only the rehearsal of asking for one. In rehearsal, mistakes are forgiven. A wrong line, a stumble, a forgotten cue, they do not end the process. They are absorbed, noted, adjusted, and the practice continues. But what if life itself is only rehearsal? Then every mistake you make, every error, every regret, does not matter in the way you imagine. You live rehearsing mistakes that dissolve into nothing, rehearsing failure that carries no lasting consequence, because there is no premiere waiting to be ruined. Think of the countless errors you replay in your mind, the words you wish you hadn't said, the choices you wish you hadn't made, the opportunities you believe you wasted. You rehearse them endlessly, imagining their weight, their permanence. Yet most of these mistakes vanish. Others forget them. You forget them. Time erases them. They mattered fiercely in the moment. But in the longer rehearsal of existence, they dissolve. Psychology supports this erasure. Studies on memory distortion show that people misremember both their own mistakes and those of others. The errors you dwell on often never happened, as you recall. Neuroscience adds that emotional weight fades, neural pathways weaken, chemical surges dissipate. The shame you rehearse is not permanent. It is rehearsal itself performed again and again until it too disappears. Philosophy softens the blow. The Stoics taught that external events matter less than your perception of them. Mistakes are rehearsals in perception, not absolute truths. Camus would argue mistakes are absurd, meaningless acts in a meaningless world. Nietzsche urged that errors, like all things, must be affirmed as part of eternal recurrence. If life is rehearsal, mistakes are not flaws, they are the lines themselves. History is a graveyard of forgotten mistakes. Leaders blundered, armies stumbled, individuals erred, but centuries later, only fragments remain. The vast majority of human error dissolved into dust. Even the great catastrophes of history are rehearsed differently over time, reframed, reinterpreted, fading in weight. If even the gravest errors are eventually forgotten, what of your small ones? They dissolve even faster, vanishing into silence. Imagine yourself rehearsing a scene. You miss a line, stumble across the floor, knock over a prop. For a moment, embarrassment burns. But then the rehearsal continues. No one remembers by the next run-through. The mistake did not matter. It was absorbed by the process. This is your life. Stumbles rehearsed endlessly, erased by repetition, forgotten by time. The paradox deepens. If mistakes do not matter, then neither do successes. Both dissolve equally into rehearsal. You cannot cling to victories without realizing errors, share the same fate. Meaning slips away whether born of triumph or failure. All dissolves into the same cycle. Rehearsal, rehearsal, with nothing solid waiting beyond. And yet, you cannot stop worrying over your errors. You replay them in silence, rehearsing shame long after others have moved on. You give permanence to what is impermanent, solidity to what is dust. The rehearsal becomes heavier because you mistake it for a performance. But no premiere waits. The mistakes are lines spoken into emptiness, vanishing as soon as they are uttered. Perhaps there is liberation in this truth. If mistakes do not matter, then you are free to make them endlessly. You cannot ruin the show, because the show will never arrive. You cannot sabotage the performance, because rehearsal is all there is. Each error is simply another gesture in the cycle, another line in the practice. Freedom is not in perfection, but in acceptance of impermanence. But recursion loops back. Even in embracing mistakes, you rehearse acceptance, turning it into another measure of success. You want to succeed at not caring about failure. That too is a mistake rehearsed, another cycle of effort. You cannot escape. You rehearse endlessly, mistakes dissolving into the same silence as triumphs. So you stumble, you err, you falter, and then you continue. The rehearsal never ends, the mistakes never last, the silence absorbs them all. Life becomes an endless rehearsal of errors that do not matter, a cycle of impermanence that erases every wrong turn, every misstep, every regret. The performance never arrives, so the mistakes never count. Every performance ends with a curtain call. The actors return, the audience applauds, the illusion is acknowledged, and the stage becomes bare. The curtain divides performance from reality, illusion from conclusion. But what if there are no curtains? What if you rehearse endlessly for a final bow that never comes? Then life itself becomes a curtain call without curtains, an endless gesture of ending, but with nothing to mark its arrival. Think of how often you picture endings. Graduation, retirement, the last word in an argument, the final goodbye at death's edge. You imagine these as curtain calls, where meaning will crystallize, where the audience will applaud, where the story will close. But when the moment arrives, it rarely feels final. Life spills beyond the imagined bow. No curtain falls. The rehearsal simply continues. Philosophy wrestles with this absence. Kierkegaard envisioned life as repetition, without neat conclusions. Nietzsche declared that eternal recurrence denies closure. Every ending is also a beginning, looping endlessly. Camus reminded us that death, the ultimate supposed curtain, offers no applause, no clarity, only silence. If the curtain never falls, then the call is hollow. You bow into emptiness, and emptiness does not respond. Psychology echoes the same truth. Closure is largely an illusion, a construct of narrative memory. Studies on grief and endings show that people rarely feel complete. Goodbyes linger, regrets echo, resolutions unravel. Even when you bow, your mind replays the scene endlessly, refusing to drop the curtain. The rehearsal never ends. It merely shifts shape. History, too, rehearses endings that never arrive. Wars declared over continue in shadows. Empires collapse but linger in ruins. Lives conclude, yet their effects ripple forward. Humanity keeps bowing, but the curtain does not fall. The illusion of closure is rehearsed, but the performance persists beyond it. Neuroscience deepens the paradox. The brain's sense of time is not linear but recursive. Memories replay, futures are anticipated, moments loop in perception. Even when events end, your mind rehearses them again and again. You bow, but the curtain remains invisible. The stage never empties. Picture yourself at the end of a long day. You imagine the curtain closing as you drift into sleep, but dreams pick up the threads, replaying scenes, rehearsing scripts. Morning begins, and the performance resumes. Even daily endings dissolve. The curtain call never comes, because the curtains were never there. The paradox sharpens. Without curtains, you are trapped in endless rehearsal. Without an ending, no performance is complete. But equally, without curtains, no performance can fail. If no bow awaits, no judgment follows, you rehearse forever, free from final applause or condemnation. The absence of curtains is both futility and freedom. And yet, you continue to seek endings. You crave curtain calls, moments where the story will resolve, where you can bow and be recognized. You imagine them in relationships, careers, even death, but each time the illusion slips. The curtain is not there, you bow into air, and silence answers. Perhaps there is strange beauty here. If there are no curtains, then the whole performance is endless. You do not have to wait for the bow. You are always in rehearsal, always in performance, always in both. The absence of conclusion means every act is provisional, every scene unfinished. The rehearsal becomes infinite. But recursion returns. Even in accepting the absence of curtains, you are rehearsing that acceptance as a final bow. You want to believe you have concluded, found peace, dropped the illusion. That, too, is a curtain call without curtains. Another rehearsal pretending to end. You cannot escape. So life continues. A stage without closure, a bow without curtain, a call into silence. You keep rehearsing, keep acting, keep waiting for the final gesture, but the curtain never falls. The call is unanswered. The performance is unfinished, forever rehearsed into emptiness. A play is supposed to be remembered. The actors bow, the audience applauds, and later, people recall their favorite scenes, their favorite lines. Memory gives the illusion that the performance mattered, that it left an imprint beyond its fleeting duration. But what if the play is already forgotten, even before it ends? What if every act you rehearse, every gesture you perform, every word you speak dissolves instantly into absence? Then life itself becomes a play already forgotten, performed into oblivion, erased even as it unfolds. Think of how quickly most of your experiences fade. The meals you ate last month, the conversations you had last year, the hours you spent in quiet rooms, gone. You lived them fully, rehearsed them as though they mattered, yet they left almost nothing behind. The play you thought you were performing has already dissolved into forgetting. Psychology reveals how profound this forgetting is. Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve shows how memory declines rapidly, with most detail gone within days. Neuroscience demonstrates that the hippocampus discards vast amounts of experience before consolidating any memory at all. Your life is more forgotten than remembered. The performance you rehearse is erased even as it is spoken. Philosophy, too, warns of this vanishing. Hume argued that the self is only memory stitched together, but if memory is mostly absence, then the self is mostly forgotten. Nietzsche saw forgetting as necessary for survival, but also as proof that permanence is illusion. Camus pressed further, even when memory holds, death erases it entirely. Every play is already forgotten by the time the curtain rises. History confirms this silence. Billions of lives have been lived, rehearsed, performed, and almost none remembered. The vast majority of names, actions, words are gone, swallowed by time. Even great events are reduced to fragments, distorted by retelling, rewritten into myths. Civilization is built on the ruins of forgotten plays, rehearsed endlessly, erased completely. Imagine yourself on stage, delivering lines with all your strength. You believe the audience will remember. But even as you speak, their attention drifts, their memories fade. By tomorrow, your words blur. By next year, they vanish. The play is already forgotten, even while you are still performing it. That is, existence, effort rehearsed into emptiness, rehearsals erased before they conclude. The paradox is crushing. If the play is already forgotten, what meaning can performance hold? Why rehearse lines destined to vanish? And yet, you cannot stop. You continue to act, to speak, to rehearse. You live as if the memory will endure, though you know it will dissolve. The illusion of permanence keeps the rehearsal alive, even as silence swallows everything. Perhaps there is strange comfort here. If the play is already forgotten, then mistakes truly do not matter. Failures dissolve as easily as triumphs. Shame and glory fade together, erased by the same silence. You cannot ruin the performance, because it is already gone. You cannot perfect it, because perfection is forgotten too. Rehearsal is all that remains, and forgetting is its faithful partner. But recursion deepens. Even as you reflect that the play is forgotten, you rehearse the hope that this realization itself will be remembered, that someone will recall your wisdom, your insight, your awareness. Yet, that too will vanish. This section, these words, your thoughts, they are rehearsals already erased by the passage of time. The play was forgotten, even before it was spoken. So you continue, acting lines no one will recall, rehearsing scenes erased as they occur. The performance is not building toward permanence. It is dissolving from the moment it begins. Life is a play already forgotten, rehearsed endlessly, erased without trace, swallowed into silence. And perhaps that silence was the only audience all along. In every theater, scenery frames the play, painted backdrops, Shifting props and clever designs create the illusion of movement, of progress, of changing worlds. Yet what if the scenery never changes? What if, no matter how many scenes you rehearse, the background remains the same? Then life itself becomes a rehearsal against scenery that never moves. Performances repeated endlessly in front of the same unmoving walls. Think of the routines that shape your days. You wake in the same room, walk the same streets, sit at the same desk, speak to the same faces. The details shift slightly, but the backdrop remains familiar, almost identical. It feels like you are rehearsing different roles, but the scenery betrays you. Nothing changes. The stage remains static, while you repeat lines against the same painted walls. Psychology describes this repetition in terms of habituation. The brain stops noticing what does not change. The scenery blurs, becomes background noise. You think you are living new experiences, but in truth, most of life unfolds against a static canvas your mind barely registers. You rehearse endlessly, but the set never shifts. Philosophy points to the same trap. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence suggests you may live the same life, with the same scenery, forever. Sartre warned that the weight of situation shapes identity. You may believe you are free, but you are rehearsing in front of scenery you cannot alter. Camus might say the absurd is clearest here. Your actions feel grand, but the background mocks you, unmoved. History reveals the monotony as well. Empires rise and fall, actors change, costumes shift, but the scenery of human life remains the same. Survival, power, desire, loss. The painted backdrops of time barely alter. New generations rehearse the same lines in front of the same stage, repeating endlessly against unchanging scenery. Neuroscience underscores the illusion. Your brain creates novelty by exaggerating small differences. A new job, a new city, a new relationship feels like a scene change, but beneath it, the structures of perception and survival remain constant. Hunger, fear, desire, mortality. The scenery never alters. The brain rehearses variety, but the set is fixed. Imagine a theatre where every play is performed in front of the same painted forest. Tragedy, comedy, epic, all unfold against identical trees, unmoving, indifferent. The actors pour passion into their roles, but the scenery does not shift. Eventually the audience stops believing the illusion. That theatre is your life. No matter the roles you rehearse, the scenery does not change. The paradox is sharp. Without changing scenery, performances feel hollow, repetitive, yet without stability, no play could exist at all. The backdrop anchors rehearsal, even as it traps it. You are bound to scenery that never changes, condemned to repeat your lines before walls that remain unmoved. And yet, you continue to act. You decorate the scenery with illusions. New props, new colors, new distractions. But the backdrop is the same. You imagine progress, but the walls never shift. You rehearse again tomorrow, in front of the same scenery, convincing yourself it is different. Perhaps there is quiet wisdom in this constancy. If the scenery never changes, then you are free to focus on the rehearsal itself. The background will not alter, but your gestures can. The repetition does not erase you. It simply reminds you that the stage was always static. The illusion of novelty was never needed. But recursion arrives again. Even when you accept the scenery is fixed, you rehearse that acceptance as if it were a scene change, as if recognizing the backdrop's permanence alters it. It does not. The scenery remains the same. Your realization becomes another performance against the same painted walls. So you act, you repeat, you rehearse endlessly. The scenery does not move. The walls remain unmoved. The stage does not shift. Life continues as rehearsal before scenery that never changes. A cycle of roles repeated in front of an eternal backdrop. The performance never arrives, because the background never allows it. Rehearsal is always about what comes next. You practice lines today because tomorrow you will need them. You sacrifice the present for the sake of what is ahead. But what if the future itself is absent? What if all your preparation is for a time that never arrives? Then life becomes endless preparation for an absent future, a rehearsal that stretches forward without destination. Think of how much of your existence is oriented toward what comes later. You study for careers, save for retirement, diet for health, plan for success. Each act rehearses itself for a future version of you who may never exist. Plans collapse, circumstances shift, time erases intentions. The future you prepared for rarely arrives. More often it dissolves into absence, leaving only the rehearsal behind. Psychology has traced this paradox. Studies on future self-continuity reveal that people imagine future versions of themselves as strangers. You prepare for someone who will not feel like you, who may not even exist in the way you expect. Neuroscience supports this. Brain scans show weaker activity when people think about their future selves than when they think of strangers. You are rehearsing for someone absent, someone who will never be you. Philosophy deepens the wound. Heidegger described humans as being toward death, meaning the future you prepare for is always shaped by an endpoint you cannot avoid. Kierkegaard warned of the despair of deferral, living always for tomorrow, never for today. Camus insisted the absurd is clearest here, preparing for futures that never arrive, building meaning in absence. Preparation becomes the performance itself. History rehearses the futility. Generations saved for futures destroyed by war. Empires prepared for permanence, only to collapse. Individuals planned for legacies erased within decades. Humanity itself rehearses endlessly for futures that vanish, absent as soon as they are imagined. The preparation mattered in the moment, but the future it served never arrived. Imagine a rehearsal hall filled with actors practicing lines for a play that has no scheduled date. They return each day, reciting, polishing, refining, convinced they are preparing. Years pass. The premiere never comes. Still, they prepare, as though the future were waiting. That hall is your life, an endless preparation for an absent future. The paradox is cruel. Without the idea of a future, rehearsal seems meaningless. But with an absent future, rehearsal is endless. You are compelled to act as though tomorrow will justify today, though tomorrow is already dissolving into nothing. You cannot stop preparing, even when you know nothing is waiting. And yet, you continue. You write notes for later. You save money for tomorrow. You rehearse apologies for moments that may never come. You live rehearsing for ghosts, future selves, future worlds, future audiences who will never arrive. The preparation fills your life, though the future remains absent. Perhaps there is strange grace in this futility. If the future is absent, then preparation itself is the performance. The act of rehearsing becomes its own meaning, detached from arrival. You live not for tomorrow, but for the rehearsal of tomorrow. The absence of the future frees you to see the present rehearsal as all there is. But recursion returns. Even in accepting that the future is absent, you rehearse this acceptance for a future moment of clarity, imagining that one day you will truly understand. That imagined day too is absent. You are preparing still, rehearsing endlessly, waiting for nothing. So life continues. You prepare meals, prepare words, prepare plans. The future remains absent, but the preparation persists. The rehearsal is infinite, the future non-existent. And when the end comes, you will realize the cruel truth. You were always rehearsing, always preparing, always waiting for a future that was never there. Every rehearsal assumes there will be a show. The lines practiced, the costumes fitted, the movements repeated, all are justified by the belief that one day the curtain will rise. But what if the show itself does not exist? What if all of life is rehearsal for a performance that was never scheduled, never written, never real? Then existence becomes preparation for the show that isn't, a cycle of endless practice with no destination. Think of how much you structure your days as though a grand unveiling awaits. You tell yourself your efforts will pay off, your struggles will be redeemed, your sacrifices will be recognized. This is the imagined show, the moment when everything makes sense. Yet each milestone arrives and dissolves. The graduation, the wedding, the promotion, each feels final until it fades. You realize the show you rehearsed for was never there. The rehearsal was all there ever was. Psychology reinforces this futility. Studies of arrival fallacy show that people consistently overestimate how satisfied they will feel after achieving goals. The show of accomplishment does not exist. It is an illusion projected onto the future. Neuroscience deepens this. Dopamine fires in anticipation, not fulfillment. The brain rehearses endlessly for a show it never allows to arrive. The pleasure is in rehearsal, not performance. Philosophy offers no escape. Camus framed the absurd as precisely this, living as though meaning waits in the performance, when in truth no show exists. Sartre suggested that roles are invented, not discovered, and thus the performance you await is a script you wrote for yourself, an illusion rehearsed until you forget it is false. Nietzsche asked whether you could affirm life if it were only eternal recurrence, a rehearsal repeated forever without climax. History echoes the same absence. Cultures rehearsed endlessly for promised shows, apocalypses, messianic arrivals, utopias. None came. The rehearsals lasted generations, but the stage remained empty. The show was always deferred, always absent. Humanity continues to live as if a grand performance is coming, though none has ever arrived. Imagine a theatre filled with actors. They rehearse tirelessly, memorizing, blocking, polishing. The spotlight hangs ready, the curtain looms, but the calendar is blank. The performance date was never written. They will practice forever, believing in a show that does not exist. That theatre is your life. You are rehearsing lines for an audience that will never gather. The paradox is unbearable and undeniable. Without the illusion of a show, rehearsal feels meaningless. Yet, with the illusion, you are deceived endlessly. You cling to the idea of performance, though none exists. The rehearsal continues, not because it leads anywhere, but because you cannot imagine stopping. And yet, you keep moving. You rehearse kindness as though it will be rewarded, ambition as though it will be crowned, sacrifice as though it will be recognized. You live rehearsing for the show that isn't, compelled by an illusion you cannot release. Even when you see through it, you continue. The rehearsal is stronger than truth. Perhaps there is strange liberation here. If the show does not exist, you cannot fail it. There is no ruined performance, no forgotten debut. The rehearsal itself is the only reality. Every gesture, every repetition, every stumble is complete in itself. The absence of the show reveals that you are already performing, always. But recursion arrives again. Even as you accept the show isn't real, you rehearse that acceptance as though it were a performance, imagining applause for your clarity, recognition for your wisdom. You turn the absence into another show, and that too does not exist. The rehearsal loops endlessly, for nothing. So you continue, lines on your lips, costumes at the ready, waiting for a show that will never come. The curtain never rises. The spotlight never shifts. The show isn't real. There is only rehearsal. Infinite, unfinished, unreal. Repetition promises progress. You repeat lines to remember them, rehearse movements to master them, live days in sequence to build towards something more. But what if repetition never leads anywhere? What if every cycle only folds back into itself, with no climax, no arrival, no destination? Then life itself is repetition without arrival, endless rehearsal, infinite practice, circles with no center. Think of how your days blur together. You wake, eat, work, sleep. The cycle feels like movement forward, but really it loops. Tomorrow is yesterday rehearsed again, with minor variations. You may tell yourself progress is happening, but the truth is harder. Repetition itself is the only reality. You rehearse endlessly, but there is no final act waiting. Psychology demonstrates how deeply repetition governs life. Habits shape nearly half of all daily actions. Automatic rehearsals repeated without thought. Neuroscience reveals why the brain conserves energy by building loops, rehearsing patterns until they no longer require attention. Yet these loops are not ladders leading upward. They are circles, endless and unbroken. Repetition is not a path, it is a prison disguised as practice. Philosophy sharpens the edge. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence asks, what if you were doomed to repeat this exact life, endlessly, without change? Would you affirm it, or despair? Camus argued the absurd lies in this very condition, repetition without arrival, cycles that never resolve. Kierkegaard spoke of repetition as both terror and necessity, the ground of existence itself. Each thinker returned to the same paradox. Life is rehearsal, and rehearsal never concludes. History tells the same story. Civilizations rise and fall in repeating patterns. Growth, war, decline, collapse. Generations repeat the same mistakes under new names. Empires rehearse themselves into dust, only for new ones to rise in the same shape. Humanity's grand narrative is not progress, but repetition. The arrival never comes. Imagine a theatre where actors perform the same rehearsal every day. They speak the lines, hit the marks, reset, and begin again. The audience never arrives. The premiere never comes. Each repetition feels like preparation, but it is endless rehearsal. That theatre is your life. The stage is set for a debut that never arrives. The paradox deepens. Without arrival, repetition feels meaningless. But repetition also provides comfort, rhythm, stability. Without cycles, chaos would reign. You are trapped between despair at endless rehearsal and dependence on it. The loops feel futile, but they are also the only structure you know. And yet, you continue. You repeat gestures, repeat words, repeat hopes. Even when you recognize the futility, you cannot stop. The brain demands rehearsal, the body demands rhythm. You live as though cycles are progress, though you know they are only circles. You rehearse endlessly, even when you admit nothing new is coming. Perhaps there is a strange grace in this futility. If arrival never comes, then repetition itself is the performance. Each cycle is complete, even if it leads nowhere. The loop is not preparation, it is the whole play. To live is not to move forward, but to repeat without end. But recursion deepens again, even as you embrace repetition as performance. You imagine this acceptance as an arrival, a breakthrough, an end to the cycle. That illusion itself becomes another repetition, another rehearsal of insight. You cannot escape. Every realization becomes another loop. The cycle rehearses endlessly, without conclusion. So you wake tomorrow, repeat the same gestures, rehearse the same lines. You imagine you are preparing for something more, but nothing arrives. Life is repetition without arrival, an endless rehearsal looping forever, unfinished, unresolved, unbroken. Every rehearsal carries the promise of a premiere. You practice your lines, polish your movements, refine your timing, all with the belief that one day the curtain will rise and the world will finally see the real performance. But what if that day never comes? What if your entire life is rehearsal for a premiere that never arrives? Then existence itself is a life never premiered, an endless preparation for a debut that will never be staged. Think of how you live as though the real life is just ahead. Childhood rehearses for adulthood. Adulthood rehearses for success, for stability, for recognition. Each stage feels like preparation for what comes next. But when you arrive, it too feels like rehearsal, leading toward another imagined moment. The premiere keeps retreating, always ahead, never here, a life rehearsed, never performed. Psychology confirms this deferral. Studies on arrival fallacy show that people consistently expect happiness to come after the next achievement, only to find it absent. Neuroscience supports this. Dopamine surges in anticipation but fades in fulfillment. The brain itself ensures that the premiere is always ahead, never present. You live rehearsing endlessly, yet the debut never happens. Philosophy echoes the same truth. Kierkegaard described life as perpetual preparation, never fully lived. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence insists there is no final moment, only infinite rehearsal. Camus declared the absurd lies precisely here. Humans live as though meaning will be unveiled, yet the unveiling never occurs. The premiere is an illusion. The rehearsal is all there is. History repeats this absence. Civilizations prepared for golden ages that never arrived, rehearsed for utopias that collapsed, anticipated futures that dissolved into ruins. Individuals dreamed of immortality, legacy, permanence, but their lives ended like rehearsals cut short, unfinished, unperformed. Humanity's stage is filled with lives never premiered. Imagine a theater where actors rehearse tirelessly. The costumes are fitted, the lines memorized, the stage lit. Every day they arrive, convinced today will be the premiere, but the curtain never rises. The audience never enters. The actors grow old, still rehearsing, still waiting. Finally the lights go out, and the stage is empty. That theater is your existence. Your life is rehearsal, and the premiere never comes. The paradox is cruel. Without a premiere, the rehearsal feels pointless. Yet without rehearsal, there is no life at all. You cannot escape the cycle, because rehearsal is all you have. You practice endlessly for a show that will not happen, yet the practice itself becomes the only performance. A life never premiered is still a life rehearsed. And yet, you cannot stop hoping. Even now you imagine some final unveiling, the moment of recognition, the breakthrough of wisdom, the piece of closure. You tell yourself that if you prepare enough, if you rehearse long enough, the premiere will arrive. But each day passes, and still, it does not. You are trapped in rehearsal, compelled by an illusion that will never be fulfilled. Perhaps there is quiet grace in this futility. If the premiere never comes, then rehearsal itself is the performance. Every gesture, every repetition, every unfinished act is complete in itself. You do not need the debut, because there is none. You are living the only show that exists, though you call it practice. But recursion sharpens again, even as you accept that life never premieres. You imagine this acceptance as a premiere in itself, the final realization, the great conclusion. Yet that too dissolves into rehearsal. You are still practicing, still preparing, still waiting for meaning that never arrives. The cycle is infinite. So you live, rehearse, repeat. The curtain never rises. The audience never gathers. The premiere never comes. And when the end arrives, it will feel unfinished, as though you were still waiting backstage. A life never premiered is not failure. It is the essence of existence. The rehearsal was never leading anywhere. It was always the show. You have walked through 30 scenes, each one rehearsed, each one circling the same silence in different disguises, scripts without audiences, costumes without characters, cues that never arrive, curtain calls without curtains. Each section revealed another angle of the same abyss. Life as rehearsal, endless, unfinished, looping forever toward nothing. And now, at the end, you stand in the same place you began, still rehearsing, still waiting, still caught in a performance that never premieres. Think of the lines you've spoken in your life. Words to loved ones, to strangers, to yourself. Each felt important in the moment. Rehearsed with care, delivered with conviction. Yet almost all have been forgotten. By others, by you. The lines dissolved into silence. What felt like performance was rehearsal. What felt like permanence was dust. Even this reflection, these words you are reading now, will be rehearsed into forgetting. They too are part of the endless rehearsal. Philosophy has circled this truth endlessly. Kierkegaard called it despair, the postponement of life for some future moment. Nietzsche transformed it into eternal recurrence, the rehearsal repeating forever, with no arrival. Camus named it absurdity, existence rehearsed in defiance of a silence that never answers. Each thinker whispered the same conclusion. The premiere is not coming, there is only rehearsal. Psychology confirms the cycle. Your brain rehearses constantly, imagining futures that never occur, remembering pasts that never happened, simulating dialogues with people who will never respond. Neuroscience shows that memory erases more than it keeps, that dopamine spikes in anticipation but not fulfillment, that habits loop endlessly without conclusion. The mind itself is a rehearsal hall, never a stage. Every thought, every feeling, every dream is practice, unfinished, incomplete, impermanent. History amplifies the silence. Billions have lived and died, rehearsing roles, preparing for futures, waiting for shows that never arrived. Empires rehearsed themselves into collapse, civilizations into dust. Even the greatest performances, the conquests of kings, the revolutions of nations, the triumphs of art, are forgotten eventually, dissolved into absence. Humanity itself is one long rehearsal for nothing. And yet, the rehearsal continues. That is the paradox you cannot escape. Even when you see the futility, even when you whisper that life is rehearsal and nothing more, you keep practicing. You wake tomorrow and repeat the same lines. You prepare for futures you know are absent. You wait for cues that will never come. You bow to curtains that do not exist. The rehearsal never ends because rehearsal is all there is. Imagine the stage from a distance. It stretches endlessly, filled with actors who never perform, scripts that are never read, costumes worn by no one. Spotlights shine on emptiness. Cues echo unanswered. Dialogues vanish into silence. The scenery never changes. The audience never gathers. The show never begins. This is not a metaphor for life. It is life itself. You are on that stage now, rehearsing lines into a void that does not reply. And here lies the recursive trap. Even knowing this, you turn the knowledge into another rehearsal. You rehearse awareness, rehearse acceptance, rehearse wisdom. You tell yourself you understand the futility, and in doing so you practice another role, the one who understands. That role too will dissolve. That script too will be forgotten. Even insight rehearses itself into silence. So where does this leave you? Nowhere new. Only here, where you always were, rehearsing. Rehearsing conversations you will never have. Rehearsing futures that will never arrive. Rehearsing endings that never conclude. You may long for a premiere, but the premiere is an illusion. The curtain will never rise. The stage will never fill. The audience will never applaud. The rehearsal is the whole play, and the play is already forgotten. Perhaps this is not tragedy but truth. If rehearsal is all there is, then every act is both preparation and performance. Every gesture, however small, is complete in itself. The show is not waiting at the end of time. It is happening now, in every repetition, in every silence. To live is not to prepare for something more. To live is to rehearse endlessly, knowing there is nothing beyond the rehearsal. But even that conclusion folds back into itself. To call rehearsal the performance is to give it meaning, to turn it into a show, and that too is illusion. The recursion is infinite. You cannot step outside it, because even the attempt is rehearsal. You are practicing forever, for nothing, into silence. And so, the loop closes. You began in rehearsal, and you end in rehearsal. You spoke lines that dissolved, imagined audiences that never came, prepared for cues that never sounded. You lived as though a premiere awaited, but the truth is simple, merciless, liberating. There is no premiere. There is only rehearsal. The silence after applause will swallow you. The stage will vanish beneath you. The scripts will be forgotten, the costumes erased, the spotlight extinguished, and yet the rehearsal will continue in others, in echoes, in memory's absence. Existence is not performance but endless preparation for nothing. A life never premiered. A play already forgotten. A rehearsal without end.